Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? Is real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show. Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part, where we are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday, usually at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This week, starting a little bit late. I'll take the onus on that, but I am happy to be back with all of you this week talking about our New York Mets. Shout out to everybody who is joining us in the live chat. I'm sure that number will continue to climb as we go along. John Saponaro out in Burbank, California, and that means my co-host holding it down back in New Jersey, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, it is great to be back talking to you, talking to all these lovely Mets fans here on Til Mets Do Us Part. Thank you for holding it down last week when I had a lot of stuff going on. I appreciate it. But before we get into any of that, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. Thank you for asking. As always, weather's a little bit crazy over here in Jersey. It goes from, waking up and it's, 10 degrees in the morning. It's 50 degrees by lunch. It's kind of odd, but either way, feeling a lot better. Seasonal depression's down, which is always a good thing. But other than that, I'm doing well. There's a lot going on with our New York Mets. I'm excited to talk about it. We talked about a good amount of things last week. Missed you as always. Good to have you back. And I'm excited because it's not just us this week. We do have a guest. We'll introduce him in a moment. And I'm very curious to see another person's side of all that is going on with our Mets, from the rumor perspective, from what went on at Amazin Day, from the jerseys, from potential moves for this team at first base, at pitcher. There's so many things to cover. And as I always say, there is never a dull moment when it comes to our New York Mets. Content is always available when it comes to this team. You are never short any week that you talk about our New York Mets. But either way, Wednesday, red lights on, 100 people in the room. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Shout out to the folks that are here. I'll do a quick roll call. Try to get to as many as I can. We got Carlos Ramos. We got D. We got Rosie K. Jeff Cohen. Corey in the house. Aaron Manning. What up? We got Armand. Chris Ram. Stanley Babbage. Charlie. Douglas Barnes, Darren Rivera, scrolling up, looking for these folks. Brad is here with us. A lot of familiar faces here this week so far. Like I said, I expect all of this conversation to be great, and I expect the numbers to jump up. We got Truman Quinn also in the house. I'm trying not to miss anybody here right off the rip, get to acknowledge as many folks as we can. I think that is all of the familiar faces, but make sure that you subscribe so that you can join in the conversation here during the live show. And you're right, Ibby, there's a lot to talk about, whether things are tangible or things are intangible, right, with the New York Mets right now. And I think that's also the important part of having guests on during this particular time of year, because as much as you and I can talk about this, as much as you and I can, give our opinions on this never-ending Pete Alonso saga, and look, people tune in, they want it. Yeah, you dozing off, just hating it. I get it. People tune in, and we appreciate it because they want to hear, our thoughts. And again, with the live show, they want to express their thoughts in a live forum among their Mets fan peers. But I think it's important to also hear from other folks this time of year. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in our guest. There he is, popping up, the entertainment statistician for the New York Mets, Matt Searle. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I know you and I have been talking about getting you on the show for a bit, not only work for the Mets, but also a big time Mets fan. So thank you again for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Listen, man, let's just jump right into your thoughts. We did it a couple weeks ago when we had a guest on for the first time. Don't want to bring up old news because there's so much to talk about, but just start to finish your thoughts as a fan about what you've seen the Mets do this offseason. Because look, people have hated on this a little bit. Look, everybody loves the signing of Juan Soto, of course, but it's become a what have you done for me lately in a lot of Mets Twitter or a lot of Mets fandom. So just as a fan, your opinion, start to finish or finish thus far of what our Mets have done in the offseason. How excited are you for pitchers and catchers coming up in just a little bit?
I'm extremely excited for pitchers and catchers, as I normally am, but I think even this year, you just feel like there's a level of stability with the organization that we haven't seen in years past. You have an owner who is obviously willing to spend what it takes to put a winner on the field. You have a top executive in David Stearns calling the shots. You have a very strong manager in Carlos Mendoza, who is coming off an excellent rookie season as a major league manager. And you have a very exciting roster that's got a nice mix of veterans and some up-and-coming talent that I think will be very exciting. As far as how I view the Mets offseason so far, obviously you can't overstate really how important that Juan Soto deal is. Juan Soto is a game changer. We saw it with the Yankees last year. Luis Severino jokingly said on Twitter, "You guys only have two good hitters," and I don't want to get any guff from Yankee fans from saying this, but let's be honest, that lineup really was built around Soto and Judge. And yes, you can isolate those two hitters, and they can be great even with less lineup protection, but those two were the foundation of the Yankee offense last year. You put Soto in this lineup, and you have Lindor hitting leadoff, maybe Soto hitting second. At this point, probably Mark Vientos hitting third. That is a game changer for this lineup. You can pencil in a hitter who has a 400-plus OBP, a 900-plus OPS every year. That is going to completely overhaul this offense that was already pretty good last season. So the Soto deal and getting a player of that caliber, a Ted Williams-type hitter in his prime when he's only 26 years old, that, to me, makes the offseason a win already. And then you look at some of the other moves they've made. Pitching-wise, you bring in Clay Holmes, going to make him a starter. We'll see how he adjusts to that new role. Frankie Montas, who is intriguing, added or used his splitter more often with the Brewers last season once he got traded and was more effective. So perhaps you get him in the Mets pitching lab. He transforms himself going this year. They kind of replace Severino and Quintana. So, and then of course we have some nice bullpen moves. I love the AJ Minter move, bringing Ryan Stanek back helps stabilize it. So I think overall the roster is looking good. It's looking solid. Pitching is looking a little deeper. I would expect maybe they add another reliever, maybe not, but I think overall it looks good. And then of course we have the ongoing Pete Alonso saga, which is not yet resolved, but overall, this is a good team, and I think that they're actually going to be much better. No matter what happens with Pete, they're going to be much better going into opening day than they were last year.
Yeah, I think that's very well said across the board. It's just a funny comment coming in before we jump into some of the nitty-gritty. D says, wait, is Matt a reporter or a fan? And then Ibby jumping in on the show account saying, Matt works as a statistician at Citi Field. So if you could just give us a quick overview of just what that entails for somebody who might be curious, what your day-to-day looks like when you're over there, during Met games.
Yeah, so I have the coolest job in the world because I get to work all 81 home games at Citi Field. I'm part of the productions team at Citi Field. And my job is basically to create a lot of those statistical notes that you see around the ballpark. For example, when Mark Vientos last postseason, when he tied the Mets single season postseason record for RBIs, I created a graphic that was then posted on the scoreboard during an inning break. So I'm in charge of writing the copy for a lot of those graphics. I also write the notes that you see when you come in and you see the starting lineup in the Jackie Robinson Rotunda. Those notes, Francisco Lindor is second in the National League in extra base hits. Those kind of notes, I write those. I also write trivia questions for the Ford tailgate trivia that happens in the 5th inning. I occasionally write scripts for on-field ceremonies, such as a couple of years ago, the 50th anniversary of the 1969 World Champions. So I'm involved in a lot of the ballpark entertainment and mostly the nitty-gritty statistical information that you see at Citi Field while you're enjoying that in-game experience.
That's great. That actually does sound really dope to be able to have your hands in,
awesome.
So many of those little things. I used to, it doesn't compare really at all, but I used to host trivia at a lot of different places, and people would be like, "Oh, where do you come up with all these questions? Like, do you pull them out of a book?" And I was like, "No, I write all of these questions. Obviously, like I will go and I will fact check them and make sure that, whatever. But like, to me, the being able to create some of that stuff and write the copy and be interesting. And, I think the only way it compares is from a stats side of things, or like, hey, you get to be the one who pushes out this cool information. I just think it's absolutely dope. Truman Quinn saying he also has to plug in the scoreboard. I don't think that's how that works. But there is a really funny visual about you like pulling up to the ballpark and like before you get up to your desk, you're like, oh, hang on. I absolutely love that. It's a fantastic joke. Ibby,
that's awesome.
When we look at the landscape, Carlos Ramos saying, "I'm jealous of Matt's job." I gotta be honest.
It's so much fun, and the day to day. Sorry, I didn't mean to distract from the ongoing conversation, but I wake up, I check game notes. I'm on Baseball Reference looking at different statistical milestones. Lindor is close to his 250th home run, those kind of things. So basically just anticipating statistical events that might happen during the game, and then being able to prepare graphics that then inform the fans and entertain the fans. So I love my job, and it just it helps further feed my Mets fandom.
There's another good one from Twitter, GSD, saying, anyone can make up statistics. 70% of all people know that. I just made this up. Which obviously is not true. But Ibby, look, let's jump right in with the most recent Mets news that dropped earlier today, which is the Ryan Stanek reunion. He comes back to the Mets on a 1-year deal. I saw this morning it was between $4 and $5 million. I don't know if they ever sorted out exactly what the dollar amount was, but that's a very reasonable deal for a reliever the caliber of Ryan Stanek. I know when he came over at the deadline, he was not his best. He was not, the lights out reliever that we had seen in the past and that we had hoped for. But then when the playoffs happened, he was arguably the best relief pitcher that the Mets had. So he's a guy you and I have talked about a bunch on this show. Before we get Matt's take, Ibby, we'll jump to you. Just the reunion of Ryan Stanek and the Mets, especially coming off of the heels of already signing AJ Minter. And of course, there's Armand, $4.5 million with $500K in incentives. So right there on that $4 to $5 million deal.
I mean, I'm always going to keep running with my hashtag Stanek stands because I loved him so much and I wanted him to be back here, and he makes a lot of sense. And it's about, when it comes to Stearns and the things that he says, it's always about guys that not only want to play in New York, who he thinks can play in New York, guys that can handle New York. He proved that he can. And also remember, Ryan Stanek has been a mainstay in the playoffs with being with Houston for so many years and has proven to be a commodity when the lights are really on. So having him back and adding him to a bullpen where a lot of us had issues with the pen once the season ended. A lot of us had issues with the pen when it came to how we went into the season last year. Now you're looking at a bullpen that's going to have Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, Ryan Stanek, Reed Garrett, Danel Nunez, Jose Buto, Sean Reed-Foley, Brazabon. So you're looking at a much stronger pen. I feel really good about the pen. Do I think I would rather have another lefty as opposed to Brazabon? That's another story for another day. But when it comes to having Stanek back, we've always talked about building that bridge and how important that bridge was, especially in the playoffs this past year, of getting to Diaz, and how we were always on pins and needles when certain guys were going in. I remember just sitting there, on the edge of my seat, screaming at the screen like a maniac, wanting Stanek to be in certain spots while I'm watching Phil Maton throw 85-mile-an-hour fastballs and just like nearly shitting my pants. Like, I was so scared. But seeing him come in, trust his fastball, pump those fastballs, get those strikeouts, like having that bridge to Diaz is so important. And now you're saying we have a righty-lefty combo of Minter and Stanek to get to Diaz. Like, that makes me really happy. So having him back at the price tag that he was allows this team to continue working within their luxury tax threshold that they want to work within. And I think it's great for the team overall.
Yeah, look, it's hard to argue with any of that. I was very high on bringing Ryan Stanek back. I am a guy who always says, give me stuff in the bullpen especially. I like stuff out of all of our pitchers because I think you can always elevate what a staff is capable of doing, especially if you get guys into a pitching lab. But you can't teach 100 miles an hour. You can't teach you can to an extent teach some of the spin rate and better grips and stuff, but like some guys just have pure arm talent, and getting the best out of them is something that the Mets are trending in the right direction of. We saw it last year with the likes of Minaya and Severino especially, but even some of the other folks, Reed Garrett until he was used till his arm fell off, and Dediel Nunez and guys like that. So I think give me stuff in the back end of the bullpen, especially when we're talking about the bullpen being a fickle situation. Year to year, things can change. Nobody has ever been Mariano Rivera, and I don't think anybody will ever be Mariano Rivera again in terms of sheer dominance year in and year out. You look at Billy Wagner, who, congratulations, finally made the Hall of Fame, and well deservingly so. He had his little bit of down spurts here and there. You get guys like Kimbrel, who, was lights out, then terrible, and then all of a sudden lights out again, then terrible again. So, you look at these guys, even the elites of the elites, the Eric Gagnes, the K-Rods, these guys don't always live up to what their billing is or the back of their baseball card every single year. But if you give me stuff, I will take it each and every single time. So, Matt, when you look at the reunion with Stanek, what does it mean to you? Because it's nice to see after last year, the Mets took a little bit more of a casual approach to building the back end of their bullpen. And that meant that they really had to rebuild it on the fly around the deadline when a lot of things weren't working. And Diaz was the only guy really giving you any value. So it is nice to see Stearns kind of pivot and say, you know what? Yes, these guys can be fickle. Yes, AJ Minter is coming off of a year where he had surgery. Yes, Stanek's lifetime numbers aren't great, but we need to get some more proven commodities in the bullpen.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, and I think this is a very solid move. It's a very smart move. Obviously, a one-year deal. It's hard to have a poor one-year deal. Stanek has
no such thing.
Yeah, exactly. He has good stuff. He's going to stabilize the back end of that bullpen. He pitched very well in the postseason last year. Seemed to really thrive on the adrenaline. The big moment against the Brewers, especially, he had some big strikeouts. So I think this is a smart approach. Obviously, bullpens are going to change over the course of the year. Guys are going to get hurt. You're going to have guys come up from AAA. We still don't know exactly what Tyler McGill's role is going to be. Is he going to be the long man? I believe he has an option, so maybe he starts at AAA. Is he the sixth starter in the rotation? The pitching staff still has a few elements that need to be sorted out, but I think this is looking at the way the bullpen is shaking up, especially with the return of Stanek and the signing of Minter. I think this is a pretty solid group, and I think it has the ability to surprise some people. And having more of that swing and miss stuff, like you were saying, it's frustrating when you watch a guy like Phil Maton who can use guile and smoke and mirrors to get through a couple hitters, but you really do want those guys that can blow you away and also have those breaking pitches that they can mix in. So I think Stanek is a good move, and I think the bullpen is going to be solid going to this year.
Yeah, Ibby, that's one of the things that I've said for a while. He uses the example Maton, you use the example Maton, but even as it relates to a guy like Frankie Montas, effectively replacing Quintana, again, a guy with better stuff. a guy that doesn't have to be perfect. And look, hats off to Phil Maton. I know he was bad in the playoffs and he was bad that last week of the season, but he was an important part of the bullpen after he was acquired at midseason. He did a lot of things that were really good for us, but Matt's right. He has to be perfect. Jose Quintana, 2 weeks ago when I was on the show, I said, shout out to him for everything he did down the stretch and in the postseason, but another guy who has to be perfect. And I just don't want pitchers on this team that have to be perfect to be effective. Ray saying, man's on YouTube asking for stuff in the back end. I stand by it. Give me all the stuff.
And one thing I would also say too is that a lot of the struggles of the bullpen last year at times were because the starters were not going deep into games. So as you guys remember, early in the year, there was even a Twitter account that was like, did the Mets starter go at least 5 innings? And in April and May, most of the time it was no. They were not getting a lot of depth from their rotation. So this year, you really do want to see those starters, even someone like Clay Holmes, who isn't stretched out yet, go 6 innings routinely, at least as you get into maybe late May, closer to the All-Star break, so that these relievers are not tired out by the end of the year. And that's what we saw against the Dodgers. The fact that the Dodgers were scoring 10-plus runs in some of these games in the NLCS, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the bullpen was so tired out, and we were relying on the same guys over and over again. Reed Garrett, I'm surprised his arm didn't fall off with how often he was used, especially early in the year. So I think the rotation has to make it easier on the bullpen by shouldering more of that workload this year.
We've been saying forever on here, and I keep on echoing it, that the way you save a pen is you have to provide innings. You got to find innings somewhere, and people want to scream and complain about the Frankie Montoses of the world because he got $17 million. But again, he provides innings. The guy goes out every year, and he pitches 170 innings, and he's been consistent with that. But everyone's like, oh, he's got a 4 ERA. It's this and that. It's like, yeah, sometimes you need a guy that can go out there, that can keep you in a ball game, that can provide the innings to save the back end, because down the road, you're going to need those guys in the pen. And if you burn them out come, May, June, you're screwing yourself for the back end of the season, which is what happened to this team multiple times over the last handful of years. So that's why you want a guy like that. And to John's point before, stuff is important. It's time to, yes, we have established a decent floor for this team, but sometimes you want to shoot a little bit higher. You want to improve. You want to go for something a little bit more. Someone like a Quintana, the fact that he had to be perfect, and he's going up against a team like the Dodgers that don't chase. So he's going to be nibbling. He's going to be trying to be perfect at hitting certain spots. They're not chasing. It makes watching that much more anxiety driven as a fan, and looking at him struggling because his bread and butter is to get guys to chase. And that was just a well-disciplined team that did not chase. So having someone with stuff that can play a little bit more in the strike zone, that bodes well for this team. And like I said, he provides the innings, which in turn is going to help the bullpen.
Well, and I also think, look, the offseason is not over yet, quite literally, but also the Mets still have some work to be done. We don't know who's going to be playing first base, or I guess in some way, shape, or form, first base and third base. We're not sure where Mark Vientos is going to factor in yet. I know we all have our opinions. We'll get into some of that stuff coming up in a little bit. But when you start to look at, we are deep enough into the offseason to look back and try to look at this in totality. And Matt, if you remember from before, the frustration being pumped out by a lot of Mets fans, and I think misguided in doing this, when the Mets go out and they sign Griffin Canning, and people are like, well, what is this for? Why do you need this guy? And it's like, well, now when you look at a pitching staff that is probably entirely built, at least to start the season. I know they're in on Pivetta. I know they're in on Flaherty. If they can get these guys on a short-term deal, maybe they add another relief pitcher as well if something falls in their lap. But right now, I think you're looking at essentially the entire pitching staff, starting rotation through the bullpen, plus the extra guys who are going to be in the minors, plus the swing guys and all of that. And all of a sudden, you start to see the importance of like, well, you know what? If you're talking about innings and you're talking about not burning guys out early in April and May in the bullpen, you're going to need a Griffin Canning. You're going to need a Paul Blackburn. You're going to need some of these other individuals to do a little bit of the hard work to get you to a point where your team is not burnt out at the end of the season.
Yeah, you need every pitcher that you can get, and depth really is the name of the game. Look at the Dodgers. The Dodgers obviously are a powerhouse. They have an incredible roster. They've spent gobs of money on starting pitching, especially this offseason. But look, even last year when they won the World Series, they were doing bullpen games in the World Series because they didn't quite have enough starters to fill out their rotation. So one thing I think that fans do not always appreciate is the value of a league average pitcher. Even just being average, I know it's not exciting. I know no one's going to get excited about the Griffin Canning signing, and that's totally fine. It's not supposed to jazz up the fan base.
I said, sorry to interrupt.
It's supposed to be the number one in your rotation.
Exactly.
But as you remember 2021, Mets, despite a lot of roster issues, injuries, the bench mob having to step up, they were in first place until the second half of the season when the Braves overcame their rut and dug themselves out of their hole. And what was the turning point in that season? When Jared Eichhoff had to pitch an important game against the Braves, and he got absolutely lit up. And Jared Eichhoff, no offense to him, but clearly was not a major league pitcher at that point in his career and probably should not have been given that start. And even if you could have just had someone that could have given you 5 innings, 3 runs, that would have been a huge difference maker in terms of the momentum of that season. So I know that nobody's looking at Griffin Canning or those type of signings and saying, wow, that's going to put us over the top. But believe me, when it comes to late August and you need that one guy to make a spot start to keep your team afloat, you will appreciate those kind of signings.
Absolutely. It's so critical. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. What I was going to say, though, was Griffin Canning shouldn't excite you, but it's not meant to excite you. Not every signing is Juan Soto. Not every signing is, wow, we got Pete Alonso back, or wow, we traded for this incredible player. Like, not every move is that. Some of them are just ho-hum. They fly under the radar, and then look at the dividends they wind up paying. And it's funny to me that people who are diehard baseball fans still lose sight of that sometimes when we have watched it time and time again, most recently this past season when we give a minor league deal to Jose Iglesias, and he is the catalyst both on and off the field that maybe changes the tenor of the entire season. So it's crazy to me that people don't how quickly they forget. It just happened a year ago.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with baseball is that things change so much from opening day over the course of the season that, look, obviously as fans, we're going to discuss every little bit of minutia that we can. We're going to dig into the roster, and especially with the offseason, because there are no games going on, we're going to analyze everything ad nauseum. But look at the 2006 Mets. Kaz Matsui was the opening day second baseman. And then by the end of the year, Jose Valentin was hitting 2 home runs in the division clincher against the Marlins. You don't expect those kind of things to happen, but inevitably in an exciting and successful baseball season, you're going to have your surprise heroes like Jose Iglesias that step up.
Absolutely. You can look back to any baseball season and you can find any example of where it either worked or, to your point on Jared Eichhoff, didn't work, and they would have been in a better spot had they, done what we're talking about now and making sure that the bottom of the roster, the floor of the roster, is as good as it can be. Because Ibby, look, again, I think that's, to transition the conversation a little bit, I think that's why some people are a little upset about the Pete Alonso stuff. Take away where the blame falls and all that stuff. We can talk about that later on. But just from a team building perspective, the fans who are saying, man, I really don't know if I want Brett Baty having to be the third baseman or, meaningful at bats to start the season. Like, I understand where the frustration comes from in that, because, I'm not a Baty guy, but also you don't know what's going to happen a month into the season, 2 months into the season, at the deadline. You can make these changes. And I know Andy Martino gets a lot of flack, and deservingly so, but I think he had that report where he called the roster, according to David Stearns, a living document. I think that was him. And I think that's a really great way to describe it. It is always evolving. It is always changing. If you're doing your job, it should be. We all had such a beef with the way the last season of Buck Showalter went down because these guys were just locked in. How many times do you need to see something not work before you're like, do anything else, literally anything at all? So I understand the frustration of saying, like, man, I really don't want Brett Baty to be the third baseman to open the season. I don't really want that either, but I understand that there's a process here, and I have faith that these guys are going to execute on that process. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I'm with you. Look, I've been more on Beatty than you have in terms of wanting something and thinking that something is there. But I continue to say that I think Beatty's success is going to come away from this team and not here. And to what you're saying before, like the boringness for some fans when it comes to the bottom half of the roster. I said this last week, and I put out some TikToks and some shorts on it, talking about how, the main difference between a Stearns and an Epler was the focus on depth. And when you didn't have that depth, you really noticed it when it came to Billy Epler, and he presented things on a surface level. But when we realized that a season is 162 games long, that you're not always going to have the surface level. Not everything is going to work. You have to pivot. You cannot be stubborn. And we know that David Stearns is more than willing to admit when something is right, when something is not right, pivoting off, doing what needs to be done, making changes. That's what you're supposed to do. So again, like this team is doing a good job in terms of filling out the bottom half, which is what needs to happen because you have to have said depth. So again, to what you guys were saying before, everything, encapsulating it all, like it's not always going to be sexy, and that's okay. It's okay. And I know we want more, and there's still more to be done, and it will be done. And don't be shocked when, this team is, to Matt's point before, saying how you start off with one player one season, and by the end, you have another guy doing all these things, whether it's Iglesias, Jose Valentin. It happens everywhere, any team in a given season. So I trust that David Stearns will be able to manage this properly. And I just hope that, I can defend this team as much as I possibly can and believe in David Stearns, but I'm going to have a hard time. I will have a hard time, John, if we do open the season and Vientos is at first and Brett Beatty's at third. I will have an issue with it. I will.
I agree.
I can't defend it.
Listen. Yeah, I agree, and I think and Matt, we'll get your opinion on this as kind of an overarching thought here in a second. Look, that I'm a adamant Pete defender. I have been.
Yes.
I was talking about giving Pete 6 years, 7 years if it was necessary in the market before the offseason, started and before you saw what his market was and what his market wasn't. We are all here with this platform to express ourselves. And, you and I are fortunate that people tune in every week and listen every week to hear what we have to say. But you do have to separate sometimes your fandom and your GM cap from, do you have faith in the actual GM and the person who is actually doing it? And that's where I agree with your larger point of saying, look, you like Beatty better than me. So if you're not going to be happy with Beatty playing third base on opening day, how do you think I feel? I think Beatty is horrendous. I think he's a 4A player. I have zero faith in his ability that he'll ever work out here or anywhere else. And I think, quite frankly, if you're already rolling out a platoon of Jesse Winker and Starling Marte at DH, I think that'll be pretty good. I think their splits show you that'll be good, but is Marte going to stay healthy? He's a real question mark. What's Jeff McNeil? He's a real question mark. I don't think if you're the Mets and you go out and you get Juan Soto, in my opinion, I don't think you can afford to add another question mark, which would be Brett Beatty or Luis Angel Acuna or Ronnie Mauricio or whatever playing third base to open the season. I wouldn't do that. But I also step away and I say, David Stearns is smarter than me. He went to Harvard. I didn't go to Harvard. David Stearns knows baseball better than me. I like to think I have a pretty good understanding of it, but this is a guy who interned with the Mets and has done this for his entire adult life. I've never worked in a front office, so I am willing to concede that he knows more than me, and until he gets it wrong, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And Matt, I'll kick this over to you on this point. I think what it really comes down to is that Ibby and I think you, from following you on Twitter for as long as I have, we're able to separate, this is what I think, versus admitting, but also I'm not a baseball front office personnel, and so there's a cap on how much I think I know when it compares to one of the brightest team building minds in the sport in David Stearns. And I think some fans refuse to acknowledge that this person knows more than they do, because that's why they have the job and this other person doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of go off of your points, I agree that if Brett Beatty is the opening day third baseman and you have to move Vientos to first, that would not be an ideal situation. Personally, I would keep Vientos at third. I think he made huge strides there defensively. The metrics were not kind to him range-wise, but certainly he's put in a lot of work over there. And I think he can certainly be a serviceable third baseman and was towards the end of last season. To your point about fans sometimes thinking that they know more than the front office, I think you're absolutely right there. As fans, it's our job to be emotional. We emotionally invest in this team. We kind of treat it like an ongoing soap opera. Every night we're tuning in at 7:00 to see what's going to happen on the episode of our favorite show and what that script is going to be like. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of information that we're not privy to. Yes, I work on the entertainment side of the Mets organization, but I'm not aware of exactly what's going on with the decision-making process of the front office. And you're right, these are very smart people. And in the last few years under Steve Cohen, the organization has put more emphasis on analytics and building an analytics team. So I think that a lot of these signings, when we talk about upside of players and positional flexibility, the people in the front office and part of the analytics group are looking at certain metrics that I think the average fan, frankly, is not aware of. With someone like Pete Alonso, I'm sure that the price point that they have settled on, and obviously, like I said, I don't know, I'm only just speaking from what I can tell. It's probably based on things like average exit velocity, hard hit rate. Yes, you can go on Baseball Savant and you can get a sense of these things, but I think that there are so many metrics these days, and there's so much data, reams and reams of data that front office execs are going through that the average fan is just not aware of how intense the decision-making process is. And the fact that you also have the business side of it, the negotiations that are going on with an agent like Scott Boras in Pete's case, that complicates things as well. So obviously it's very easy as a fan to say, why haven't they signed this player yet? Why don't they go out and trade for this player? But obviously it is not that simple most of the time. And a major league roster it's a jigsaw puzzle, and you're constantly trying to figure out which pieces fit. And it's not always going to be easy to put players in the right positions at any given time. So I think there has to be some patience on the part of fans going into the season.
You know, I think with Matt, maybe you're muted. With respect to the process and with respect to, with all due respect, going out to people who follow this show, people who watch this show, people who follow me, people who I interact with, I think this Pete Alonso free agency, Ibby, has shown that a lot of people just fundamentally do not understand the process, and that's okay. It's okay to not understand it. I'll admit I learned things about free agency this year because of Pete Alonso that I previously didn't know. But again, I didn't understand it. I went to resources. I found out how it works, and I educated myself. And I think a big problem, not just in sports, but in the world today, is that people don't want to actually do any of the work. They want to have an opinion, but they don't want to base it in anything. And I think you're seeing this a lot because people are going, well, what's the difference? Just give them the $30 million. Well, the difference is the luxury tax. The difference is what that costs. And then they're going to go, well, it doesn't matter. It's Steve Cohen's money and he's a multi-billionaire. Don't shill for the billionaire. I'm not shilling for the billionaire. I'm saying that it doesn't make sense for Steve Cohen to pay $31 million in dead money, which is what it would essentially be, not to the Mets payroll, not to make the Mets better, but to Major League Baseball. And some of that money is going to go to his competition, and they're either going to use it to make their team better, or they're going to pocket it, and he's just going to, more than likely they're going to pocket it, and he's going to have to sit there and go, man, I just gave the owner of the Miami Marlins $5 million for no reason. It's not him not doing everything to get the player. He doesn't want to pay a tax that in no way, shape, or form makes the Mets better. And people need to understand where those lines lie. That's just one example of people missing the mark. But, if the Mets give Pete Alonso a $30 million deal this year, that is going to put them in the upper echelon, past the Cohen tax, if you will, the highest level of the luxury tax. And that means that every dollar that they are over that amount, they get taxed 110%. So Pete Alonso's $30 million contract cost the Mets $61 million or thereabouts to have him on your team if there are no deferrals, if there is no wiggle room in the money. So it's not just as simple as asking the billionaire to shell out a bunch of money for your favorite player because you think that's a good idea. It's not. It's bad business. It's bad team building. It's stupid to try to empower your rivals around the league. And it's even stupider if they're not even going to take that money and empower their teams. They're just going to sit there and throw the money in their pocket. Why would Pete Alonso want to pay Steve Cohen want to pay another owner for their new yacht? Why? He doesn't have to do that. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's always player dependent. We always talk about projecting out. You're not paying guys for what they've done. You're paying them for what they're going to do for you moving forward. So yeah, to your point, when there's a tax like this and you go over it, and you're paying $60 million really on a player, is it worth this for the amount of years that said player might be here? And I really think that a lot of people, to bring it back to what you're saying before, a lot of people look at this as if it's just you go to the trade screen when you're playing the show and you just think, okay, let's do this, this, and this. Okay. And this is done. Okay. Now it's done. Like, do this. It's like, no, it's a wheel. Like, everything is working. There's so many small details that no one realizes. They think they can all do. It's why we're all couch GMs. We're all couch pobos. Like, that's what we are, because we think that that's the only thing that the job entails. And that is wrong. Does a majority of this fan base want Pete back? Yes, it does. Is it exhausting to this point? Yes, it is. Should people better, educate themselves, to John's point, when it comes to all of this? 1,000%. Because again, we bring it back to everything that was also said at Amazin Day, where you have Steve Cohen saying everything that he's saying to the fans, being open and honest, which is what every single Met fan has wanted forever. Forever, Mets fans just wanted open honesty. Tell us what's going on. Don't lie to us. We're too smart for that. And it's the truth. And it's why I put out, to get an idea, we got 60 votes so far on the YouTube side for this. I put out a question saying, are you a fan of Steve Cohen being open and honest about Alonso's negotiations at Amazin Day? We got 58 votes and counting so far. 98% say yes. 2% say no. I want to know who that one person is that voted no, because I'm curious as to why you didn't like it. So if you are in the chat and you voted no, please explain why. But no, I just think that people need to get a better understanding of, there's a lot more at play here. We all understand that you want more. We as fans want more, but notice that it's always player driven. Is this player worth, is the juice worth the squeeze? Mm-hmm. Is this what I want? Am I willing to go over? If they were closer and it was about going over because they were going after Juan Soto, they wouldn't think twice, because it's Juan Soto. But there's a difference here as you're trying to build and get these pieces. Am I going to get the same thing if I pay and go over for a piece? Because now you're costing me in terms of the following years by removing draft picks, by removing compensation, and you're not able to build what you're trying to do. Yes, you want Pete, but guess what? He wants 5 years. He's not getting 5 years. We're going to give him 3. He wants to opt out. This is what we're going to say here and this and that. It's not always going to be, in their eyes, from a projection standpoint, going to work out for us. So no, we're not going to give you this because we don't want to pay this price. We don't want to pay $60 million, even though it's only 30, because you're not worth it. We don't think you're going to project out the way we want you to and help us. So there's so much more. I wish fans would take the time, but we are living in a time where nobody wants to take the time. Unfortunately,
nobody does want to take the time to again, educate themselves, to learn the nuance. Not nobody, but most people don't. I don't want to just paint with a
vocal minority. The vocal minority always want to make sure that they're putting stuff out, Sleepy Stearns, this and that. And it's like, are you even looking? Like, the ones that are screaming, hey, give Pete $30 million, give him the money. Are you paying attention to this? Yeah. Like, at any of this, they've offered him multiple contracts, and he keeps on saying no. What do you want the Mets to do? He keeps on saying no. What do you want them to do?
I tweeted this out, and again, I don't want to repeat myself, Matt, like a million times over. I'm pro Pete. I'm pro player as you can get. I'm definitely anti-owners who are billionaires or hundreds of millionaires at the very least crying poverty. I'm pretty anti-billionaire in my regular life. So this is not me shilling for the owners over the players. I think the players can get and should get every dollar that they possibly can. But when you take that part of my being aside, and then you put on the how do you intelligently build a baseball team cap on, now you start to see it doesn't make sense to bid against yourselves. If the Mets did not have the top offer to Pete Alonso all offseason long, Pete Alonso would already be playing somewhere else. It is very clear that the Mets have put forth the best offers. Now, whether they've taken those offers away and there's no offer on the table right now, but it's clear that they have continued to give him the best offers. It's clear to me at this point, I could say it on January 29th, that Pete's desire is to come back here, but he's allowing Scott Boras to run the show, which is his prerogative. He can do that all he wants. But I just think when you look at what you're seeing here, it's a very complex situation. There is blame to go around. I can get behind that, but I cannot get behind fans booing David Stearns at Amazin Day. I appreciate that Cohen stepped out and did what he did, but how dare you boo a guy who in his first year taking over the team gets you to the NLCS, comes back, signs Juan Soto. I know Cohen had a big part in it. Of course, he's the owner. But he does have, like, the stuff that he has done, and you wanted this guy. Everybody in the world that's Mets fans wanted him. How dare you boo him? So short-sighted.
And I just don't understand the idea of you're going to Mets Amazin Day, Fan Fest, this incredible event. You can meet players. You get to interact with the executives. You could actually take a picture with David Stearns and Steve Cohen. Look, I'm not saying you have to blow smoke or whatever, but at the same time, have some class. You know, there's a time and a place for everything, and I do not think that is an appropriate venue to be expressing that kind of frustration, especially when they are giving you a presentation and explaining their plans for the team and answering questions. It is just not the time to express that kind of negativity. Not that I necessarily know that there would be an appropriate venue to do that, but that to me, I do not understand taking the time out of your day to enjoy this great event that is for the fans, specifically for the fans, and then having that kind of vitriol towards, maybe that's too strong a word, but having that kind of negative attitude towards people that just built a team that went to the NLCS and was 2 wins away from a World Series last year. And as you said, John, just signed one of the great free agents in the last 2 decades in Juan Soto that's going to completely change this team. I just do not understand that mindset. It's fine to be frustrated. It's fine to want your favorite player back. Of course, we all have that sentiment. I'm not saying you can't have those conversations with your buddies, but when you go to a fan fest and you have the opportunity to talk directly or to directly hear from the executives, which a lot of fans do not get the opportunity to do, to have that kind of reaction, I just do not understand. And I don't think it reflects well upon those fans. I certainly wouldn't say that the whole fan base is like that, but I don't think it reflects well upon those fans at all.
You know what?
They boo, and then all of a sudden they ask for a picture afterwards. Like, that's what it is. It makes no sense.
I want to bring up a couple comments here from Truman Quinn. And he says the Dodgers don't seem to mind with regards to the spending that they do. And then he says that fans have a right to boo Moneyball, and then following it up by saying fans booed Lindor and look what happens. So okay. I think
those comments are wrong in just so many ways. I'll let you go first.
No, you go. Go ahead. You're the guest.
Say it. Yeah.
Okay. They're wrong to boo Moneyball. I mean, first of all, the Mets are not operating under a Moneyball mindset. They're going to have a $300+ million payroll. They just signed Juan Soto to the largest contract, not just in baseball history, but for any professional athlete ever. So to say this is Moneyball is pretty ridiculous. This is not the end of the Wilpon days post Madoff. Look at what the fans booed Lindor, and look at what happened. Yes, the fans booed Lindor, and he had the worst season of his career. And it was not until he took his power back, teamed with Javi Baez, did, the thumbs down gesture, which was not popular among a lot of fans, but he certainly regained his own power. And it was not until then that he started playing better. But the fans booing Francisco Lindor did not improve his performance. And here's one thing I want to say in terms of fans booing. You are allowed to boo as a fan. Obviously, I would never tell a fan that they can't boo. That is certainly well within your rights.
I wouldn't have, so you're better than me at that.
A fan of a baseball team who goes to a sporting event. But what fans have to understand is that booing is a way to show your frustration or your displeasure with the product that is on the field. But do not, under any circumstances, think that you are improving the player's performance, because you can ask the players themselves. Trevor May, who is a great media personality post-playing career, has talked about this. Booing does not help the players perform. It actually gets in their own heads and is detrimental and is counterproductive, especially in a sport like baseball, where you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times, even if you're great. So saying, the fans booed Lindor back to being a great player. No, it was not until he had a fresh start in 2022 when the fans weren't booing him that he finally was able to relax and play up to his full potential. So that comment is just wrong on so many levels.
I appreciate that you said that you were like, I got so much to say. I'm like, go for it, man.
It's that badge of honor that we always talk about in here that New York fans tend to have, where it's like, hey, if this guy can't handle the booze, he can't handle New York, and get his ass out of here. He's not good enough. He can't handle pressure. Like, that's the stuff that you hear, and it's like, no, it's nonsense. It's not needed. We're here to pick our guys up. We want them to perform. We want them to do well for us. So no, the booing aspect did not elevate Francisco Lindor. It made his life harder. That's what it did.
No, coming from a person who did stand-up comedy for 10 years, to me, the booing people who have the feeling that you just expressed, Ibby, where it's like, booing makes them play better. It's the same thing as an audience member who comes to a stand-up show and they heckle you, and then afterward they come over to you and they're like, hey, I helped you out, right? And you're like, no. My jokes are so much funnier than anything you could ever do in your life. And you know how I know? I'm on stage and you paid to come see it. So shut up next time and just enjoy the jokes that I spend hours and days writing and crafting and honing and touring. And no, it's not better. Nothing you did made it better. Stop thinking that you helped me.
When it comes to sports, too, it's like they're your players. That's your team. Why would you not want to support them? It's fine to be annoyed that they're not playing well. Certainly, there have been players over the years, and I'm not going to list specific players, but you go, man, I can't watch this guy's at-bats. Whatever. Yeah, I can understand wanting to express that level of dissatisfaction. Man, James McCann is up again with runners on base. I cannot live with this. I get it. I totally understand. I'm not saying fans can't be negative or indulge in those type of feelings, but at the same time, don't you want to support your players? Don't you want the team to know that you're on their side? To me, as a fan, that's a way that you can positively impact the team. And we saw it with Trey Turner 2 years ago, first year in Philly. He was awful. He was actually way worse than Lindor was, because Lindor, at least when he was struggling offensively, was still playing great shortstop. Trey Turner was struggling on both sides of the ball, and Philly, just like New York, he's very harsh on their athletes. Philly was probably tougher on their athletes. And what happened? The fans said, you know what? We're going to give him an applause. We're going to at least let him know that we're on his side. And after that, he totally changed his season around.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. Carlos Ramos saying John goes at hecklers even more harsh than Twitter trolls. Carlos has never seen me do stand-up, but that is true. I have been known to eviscerate hecklers. Don't heckle me, man. Don't heckle me. I've got things going on.
I want to bring one thing up here because Chris Ferraro, it's great to see Chris here. He hasn't been here live in a while, so good to have you on the show, Chris, live. And he keeps on bringing this up. I want to make sure I post it here. I disagree here. The fans did not agree with one thing Stern said. I think they have the right to disagree. And because of the Blues, the transparency from Cohen came. Now, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I believe that the booing came after he said that we like our young guys. Is that where the booing came from? So, look, you have to also understand that is part of the the negotiating aspect of all of this, because look, they can say all they want about Pete. They still knew that that eventually someone was going to come back to the table because he's still out there. But also notice that there was a major difference, and it was written by Ken Rosenthal after the fact, where he was saying how it was curious the things that that Steve Cohen said, mainly because of the rules that are written within the CBA. Now, I'm going to assume here that David Stearns knows the CBA a lot more than Steve Cohen does. And he talks in circles a little bit and pumps up his team from what they have because they don't have said player on the roster. Pete Alonso is not on his roster right now, so he can't talk as if he is. Steve Cohen doesn't care, says what he wants, even though he did skirt the line a little bit, come close to that line where it came to a certain title within the CBA saying you can't speak on these things publicly because if it tanks a player's overall market, that's against the rulings from the Players Association.
Yeah,
so
he came real close. He came real close.
He came really close to that. So you have to understand that when Stearns is saying something like that, it's more so being protective. And then that's when Cohen said, fuck it, I don't care. I'm going to say what I want. And that's what fans appreciated. But at the same time, I don't blame David Stearns for saying what he said because they've been in a constant negotiation where they keep on being told no when they know that they're the only dance in town. Like, this is the only place that you can go. And the deal that they have given is better than Toronto, is better than the Angels, better than what the Giants offered in the beginning. So you keep on telling us no, then yeah, I'm going to say, look, we have some guys here as well that we're willing to work with. We like our young guys. So I can't blame him for saying those things because it's not improper when you've been constantly being told no from the guy that you've been courting this entire time.
Yeah, and let's be honest, you're right, the standards are a bit different, but Stearns has also not lied to Mets fans as much as any GM can be transparent. We always talk about GM speak and coach speak, and I know I've brought this up on the show before. Everything Stearns has said from the moment he got here and took this job, he has lived up to, even to the point, Matt, where he's like, you know, I expect us to be competitive heading into 2024. I like the team that we've built. You know, I'm always going to adjust and I'm always going to look at improving the team throughout the course of the season. It's never finished. Like, you watched that all unfold. The Mets were better than anybody, like any fan thought they were going to be. They made it further than any fan thought they were going to. Stearns did build a team he believed in. Stearns did change the team on the fly when the team needed it. Stearns did go out and get meaningful additions at the deadline and before the deadline, as the case with Maton and some other folks. So, like, I just think as far as GMs go, they're always going to have to be a little bit coded, but Stearns has been very honest. So for people to come out and boo him, when you look at the honesty he's shown, and you look at, most importantly, I know it's only been a year, but the success on the field, you can't boo this guy. You can't. Right. It's embarrassing.
There's absolutely no reason to boo. And you're right. They've been very transparent. They've been very open and upfront with the fans. This is not like a few years ago with Brodie Van Wagenen, who was an agent who got thrust into a GM role that, frankly, he was not really qualified for. And they were signing guys on the cheap. And obviously a lot of that was because they were limited by the Wilpon spending. We know that. But it's not like, oh, we just signed over-the-hill Dellin Betances, 6 ERA, Rick Porcello, Michael Wacha, and this is our championship team. You know, they're not trying to sell us on that. They're selling us on a very good team, on a team that just, as I mentioned earlier, went to the NLCS, was very close to the World Series. And another thing I want to say is that, and look, I'm not trying to disrespect fans. I am a fan myself, so I totally get it. I definitely understand the fan mindset. But fans a lot of times are wrong when it comes to wanting to sign certain players and feeling that, okay, the team absolutely needs this player. I remember Yoenis Cespedes. Obviously, we wouldn't have gotten to the World Series in 2015 without the contributions of Yoenis Cespedes after that trade in the second half. And they did sign him to a deal, and he had a great 2016, won a Silver Slugger, and then opted out of that contract. And then, of course, that contract ended up being a very bad deal. But there were so many fans that were breathing down their neck saying, you can't let Cespedes walk. There's no way you can let Cespedes walk. And in hindsight, it would have been better if they had let him walk because that ended up being a very bad contract.
Well, it's funny, Matt, because it's not that no one could have foreseen him getting into a fight with a wild boar and a ranch. Like, but No one could have seen that exact situation happen. But to your point, everything that people were worried about, like baseball people were worried about with Cespedes, was what came true. Does he really love baseball? Is he going to get the money and say, screw it? Like, so to your point, like, it's not even like, oh, it was a bad deal because like then he got hurt. It's like, no, it was a bad deal because he did the exact same thing that people who know him in the sport were like, I don't think this is a good idea because this guy is weird.
Right. And another thing I want to talk about is that people booing after Stearns said, we like our internal options. We like our guys, the guys that we have now. Again, it's always more exciting when you sign a guy like Juan Soto, when you make a big blockbuster trade. People always want that shiny new toy. Maybe you were mentioning this in our little pre-chat. Everybody wants that shiny new toy. We all want the novelty of something that we have not experienced before. But at the same time, I don't think it's wrong for a GM to say, yeah, we believe in our guys, because look at Mark Vientos. And yes, I understand that Brett Beatty was the starting third baseman to begin last year, and Mark Vientos didn't really get his shot until late May, early June, and it didn't really establish himself until then. But at the same time, if at the beginning of 2024, if I was like, hey, Mark Vientos is going to hit 27 home runs and like, you know, this number of at-bats in 120-something games, and he's going to have a huge postseason, you would have been like, okay, well, that's wildly optimistic. You're just saying that because he's in the Mets system. No way is he going to produce like that. We should have signed someone like Matt Chapman or some other proven commodity to play third base. But you know what? Sometimes the internal options surprise you and end up establishing themselves. So you really do have to wait and see sometimes.
You have to allow guys to actually show what they can do. And David Stearns said that from day one. He said, look, we're going to allow guys to show what they have, to see what's here, so that we can decide if they belong here or not. These guys are prospects. We have them for a reason. Do they show out? Can they do something with the time that they're given? We have to allow. It doesn't matter where you play. You can play in Milwaukee. You can play in Cincinnati. You can play in New York. Okay, you have to be able to build from within. You're not always going to be able to just buy people like everyone thinks you can. You have to build from within.
And before we head into the break, I do want to just jump back into this one comment we really didn't address from Truman, which was the Dodgers don't seem to mind. And again, I've tweeted this. I've said parts of this on the show before. The Dodgers are essentially a decade ahead of the Mets in where they need to be. The Dodgers ownership group changed 8 years before the Mets ownership group changed. And if you go back and you look at the early iterations of the Dodgers before they became the big bad will outspend everybody Dodgers, they did a lot of what the Mets are doing now. They built internally. They overhauled their systems of development, their pitching labs, their scouting. They started doing all of the boring things behind the scenes. They still threw money at players the way the Mets are throwing some money at some players. You know, they went out and they acquired guys to try to be as competitive as they could be on the field. But they also went out and they got a guy who was a brilliant baseball mind from a small market team. And no one's complaining now that Andrew Friedman is running the Dodgers like a small market team. He came from the Tampa Bay Rays, the smallest of the smallest teams ever. They've also built a culture of both behind the scenes and of winning that allowed them to go out and attract some players. They moved pieces around. They were able to get Ohtani, who is a unicorn in terms of the money that he makes with endorsements. He makes $70 million a year in endorsements. The next closest player is Aaron Judge. He makes $7 million a year. So he's able to defer his contract. He's able to open up the coffers for the Dodgers in a way that other teams simply cannot operate. They have thrown caution to the financial wind for the next 9 years of that contract because they can now. The Mets are trying to get to that point, but the Mets are not quite there yet. And the other thing that you have to remember in this entire process is the Dodgers let Corey Seager walk. The Dodgers let Cody Bellinger walk. The Dodgers acquired Trey Turner and Max Scherzer and Manny Machado, all of whom are better all-around players than Pete Alonso. And they all let them walk in the name of being a better team. So I like Pete Alonso, but you just have to understand that all of these things that we've been talking about for the last, 40 minutes as it relates to Alonso, they're all factors. You cannot sit here and just be like, well, the Dodgers spend a lot of money. And Truman, I'm not trying to take you to task for the 3 comments. I think they're important comments that represent how a lot of the fan base feels, and that's why we're reacting to them the way that we are. So it's just stuff that you have to keep in mind, and you have to have some perspective on. That said, let's head into the break. Come back. We still have plenty more to talk about. Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot just for a second. You said you could give us a lot of time. Can you give us another 40 minutes to an hour? Are you having a good time?
As long as you guys want.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Thank you. I love that. We're going to head into the break. If you're watching live for the first time, you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. You don't have to worry. The break is just a 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So it's John Saponaro. It's Matt Ibanez. It's our guest this week, Matt Searle. It is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday. We usually start 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is 2:30 p.m. here on the West Coast where I reside. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, back together this week after my brief hiatus where I was in the frozen tundra known as Connecticut last week. It was brutal. It was 3 degrees when I woke up in the morning. And if you're wondering, hey, does living in LA for about 5 years change your body with regards to being used to cold temperatures? It does. It 100% does. I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in the Northeast with the winters. My dad has lived in Connecticut since I was 12 years old. I have certainly been in 3 degrees before, but no 3 degrees has ever felt worse than the 3 degrees that I experienced last week. East Coast, greater than the West Coast. I mean, listen, man, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm a Brooklyn boy through and through and through. So I'm not going to, I can't argue with that, but I do live out here on purpose. And it's pretty good. You know, it's like 70 degrees today. So it's all good. But John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, as always, our guest this week is Matt Searle. Matt, before we get back into the conversation, where can folks find you on Twitter and stuff like that? We met on Twitter. I love your takes. I've been following you for a minute. So where can they find you if this is their first time hearing from you?
Yeah, you can find me on various social media platforms, Twitter, @Searle Baseball, same handle for Instagram. Those are my main social media platforms. I tweet a lot, as you know, and people seem to enjoy my content on Twitter. So follow me there if you want to get up-to-date Mets content. I try to keep things not only informative, but also lighthearted and humorous whenever I can as well.
Speaking of lighthearted and humorous, I meant to star the comment, but I missed it. Somebody asked earlier or kind of alluded to the fact earlier to the way that the ballpark will sometimes troll teams, other players on other teams, like, Roger Clemens' son and stuff like that. Is that a part of your job? Is that something that you work on as well?
Yes. So part of my job is that I write.
That's great.
The notes that come up on the scoreboard when players have their first at-bat. So when Francisco Alvarez comes up to bat and I write, led National League catchers in home runs in 2023. That's part of my job and something that I really enjoy doing. And the Roger Clemens trolling thing, that was something that was completely independently done by me. It was one of those things where I'm just given basically free reign within a certain reasonable stretch to write notes for the other team. And usually I keep it kind of generic. Oh, Bryce Harper, 2-time NL MVP, unless I'm really trying to troll. And with Cody Clemens, at first I was thinking, do I just say, Roger, son of Roger Clemens, something really generic and boring like that. But then I was like, well, a lot of people from his last name are probably going to guess that, yes, he's the son of Roger Clemens. So then I thought, what if I get a little bit trollish here, and what if I do something a little bit fun? And that's when I did Mike Piazza hit 421 against his father. picture, I tweeted it out, and people really responded to it. And so after I got the interaction on that, I was like, okay, every time he comes to bat for the rest of the series, I'm going to do a note like that. So I did a whole series of basically Roger Clemens troll notes. And yeah, it ranged from Mike Piazza hit 421 against his father. He had a 4.89 ERA against the Mets. Sean Estes was the first pitcher to homer against him, that kind of a thing. And we had fun. So yeah, trolling players within a certain limit is one of the things that we enjoy doing at Citi Field in the productions office.
That's absolutely fantastic. Rosie, sorry, Abby, I jumped you.
Yeah.
Rosie saying trolling Clemens is always going to be okay. And then here's the one that you were going to pull up, Abby. Chris Ferrara saying, Matt, I sit below the screen with the 7 line and kept looking at that board. So your work is appreciated.
Chris is one of my very loyal followers. He's always great on Twitter.
Speaking of Chris, one of the guys who one of the people who keeps us honest on this show, Ibby, and Chris saying independent safes. I did not forget. True. I didn't forget. I was giving Matt the floor first, but we got to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes. Fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And of course, as you can see, free shipping on anything over $99. Majority of the site is $99. So you're getting free shipping. And as always, every week I put someone in that safe, lock it, throw away the key, toss it.
I know who it's going to be.
You know who it's going to be? I'm going to be well, let's see if you're right. I'm going to be putting in every single person that booed David Stearns. And that's who I'm putting into the safe because you're ridiculous. And yeah, I'm putting you in the safe and locking and throwing away the key because I'm tired of you for being not nonsensical, in my opinion. Of course, everyone's entitled, but that is my opinion. I put them into the safe. Who did you think I was putting in the safe, John?
Okay, so I'll admit I was wrong. Okay. I thought you were going to put Scott Boras in the independent safe.
I mean, I feel like I put Scott Boras in like every other week, so I figured, he's been in enough of them, so I'll try someone different. But look, if I want to buy 2, if I'm feeling froggy and I want to buy a second one because of the free shipping, I'll put Boras in there as well. And even though that whole thing came out today saying how other agents have been told to not contact Pete, and Pete's turned off his phone, and that entire thing because people are trying to poach him away because he's not getting the contract. I would throw Boras in there as well because let Pete free so he can just sign back already because I'm tired.
Well, you would have to buy a second independent safe for Scott Boras because if you're going to put a bunch of random Mets fans in one safe, we know that Scott Boras is not going to mingle with the riffraff. So you're going to have to get that man his own special little safe. I want to jump back into the comments. A lot of good ones here before we kind of move on a bit. Darren saying with regards to the conversation we were having right before the break, the Mets also lost money and the Dodgers made the most money last year. That is a factor. Steve Cohen has been willing to lose money on this team every year. And again, I'm not shilling for him. He has more money than he can ever spend and more money than he could ever lose. But the fact of the matter is he has operated in a way that most baseball owners do not, which is I will spend and I will spend and I will spend and I will mean all of it, but I will lose money. Because a lot of these other teams, Matt, as Ibby steps away for a moment, probably got something going on with the kids. He'll be back in a second. But, Matt, a lot of other owners in baseball are not going to operate at a loss and then also operate the way that Steve Cohen is. Lose money and then sign Juan Soto for $750 million.
Yeah, and Steve Cohen definitely operates a lot differently than a lot of owners do. And I think people don't realize just how fortunate we are to have an owner who basically operates like a fan that just happens to have not an unlimited supply of money, but obviously he is one of the wealthiest owners in sports and has said in the past that money is not really the main object when it comes to building a roster. And he wants to do whatever it takes to win. And look, another thing that has to be taken into consideration is that, as you talked about, the Dodgers have for the last decade or so, maybe 15 years, you could say, if you look at their run of division titles and postseason appearances, they've been building an organization. It's not just about going out and getting the most expensive free agents. It's also about having a top flight minor league system that develops good players. It's about having excellent scouts. It's about having an excellent analytics team that can find under the radar players the way the Dodgers were able to do with Max Muncy and, sorry to say, Justin Turner after the Mets non-tendered him. It's about being able to replenish your talent through various feeds, whether that's international signings, whether that's, as I mentioned, the minor league system, making trades. So there are just so many aspects that go into building the type of organization that can just win year in and year out, and that can always be a contender to not only reach the postseason, but also possibly bring home a championship. And it's not easy to do, but I think that the Mets are much closer than they have been in the recent past.
Absolutely. And this is another good one from Truro saying it took the Dodgers 5 off seasons to complete their big 3 of players. Another thing that people need to understand. Tonks over on Twitter saying sometimes you have to read the room, and Alonso is trying to read Braille. I think that's more on Boras, but that's a good joke.
That's a good one.
Lisa G chiming in saying, "Hi guys, I was there live when the fans were booing Cohen and Stearns. It was embarrassing and in poor taste. I completely trust Cohen and Stearns. LGM, Orange Heart, Blue Heart." And then I'm going to pull up this other one from Twitter. And I think this just speaks to what we were talking about as we headed into the break with, baseball fans, some fans just not understanding the process. DPG 3134 commented on one of my posts saying, why are they nitpicking, this is the Mets, over a few mil when they're already at $300 million in payroll? Why is Pete a bridge too far after giving one guy $750 million? They don't have an in-house replacement for his bat this year. And I think that is indicative of everything we were talking about, of just not understanding the process. This is not a nickel and diming situation. It's just not.
Yeah. And I've said before also that the reason why I've been adamant on this show during the whole Soto buildup, that when the comments from Hal Steinbrenner came up about 2025 and, we're going to build around you, Juan, and we're going to have this for you for 2025 and this and that, I said that was a misstep, because when you're someone like Soto, who's going to be signing for 15 years, or at the time we're thinking like 12, 13, 14, whatever, that long of a time, the rest of your career you're spending there, it's not just about the one season. It's about how are you going to handle this moving forward. So again, I see people in the comments too, and we've been hearing this for a while, like, you got to protect Soto. I understand that. I get that, but it's about protecting Soto moving forward. It's not just about 2025. And I know, and I've been saying this ad nauseum since the season ended. I said, if you think that David Stearns is going to build this team this offseason based off of the finish of last year to make this team a World Series or bust type of team, you're going to be upset, because that's not what he's going to do.
What happened the last time we tried to do that? It set our franchise back.
Failed.
If Cohen wasn't willing to spend all the money to get Acuna and Gilbert and Clifford and all these prospects and shed money off the books, we would be in dire straits right now.
Yeah. So again, sorry,
I mean to interrupt, but I think just based on the comments that Cohen made at Amazin Day, it seems like it isn't the dollar figure that is the issue, that is the sticking point when it comes to signing Pete Alonso. He said that he does not like the structure of the contracts that have been offered. He feels that they are asymmetric, right? So he feels that the whether it's the opt-outs or the buyouts or whatever else is in the contract, he feels that is way more beneficial to Boras and Pete's camp than it is to the team. And I believe that Steve Cohen, as we saw with the Soto contract, obviously is willing to open up the checkbook and give players top dollar. And I think the fact that Pete is a homegrown Met, the fact that if he comes back, he'll be the franchise's all-time home run leader, I think that Steve Cohen, while that isn't going to be the main decision-making factor, it is something that is in the back of his mind. But at the same time, I felt that Steve Cohen almost sounded offended at what Scott Boras had been offering in terms of this negotiation, and felt as if Boras is not playing fair when it comes to these offers. And that, I think, is what people have to understand, is that it's not just about the money. I think if it was just, hey, $30 million a year over 3 years, everything's fine, it was nice and clean and dandy, they would have signed that contract already. I think that there are stipulations within the contract being put in there by Scott Boras in order to get a little more. And yes, that's his job. That's what he has to do for his client. But I think those type of finer details, the fine print in the contract, I think that is what the holdup is, based on what Steve Cohen said at Amazin Day.
I want to give a shout out to Ryan Finkelstein, who's on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. He's the host of the Locked On Mets podcast. It's a daily podcast, a great listen. He's been a guest on this show a bunch, and he has done a lot of really good breaking down of what he thinks the issues are with regards to the contract negotiations between the Mets and Scott Boras, where Pete Alonso is concerned. And he echoes a lot of what you were just talking about, Matt, where, he said, as far as the asymmetric nature of it goes, Ibby, that there is just not this lack of understanding from or lack of willingness to budge on the Boras side, where it's like, look, we can give Pete he used an example, I think today or yesterday, where he said, let's say Cohen and the Mets and Stearns offered a 3-year, $90 million contract to Pete that had heavy deferrals in it, the way that the Santander contract did with the Jays, so that they could get Pete closer to their dollar amount as far as the luxury tax was concerned, while also giving Pete every dollar that he was actually asking for. He thinks those are the kinds of sticking points that Boras is like, well, I don't want a deferral that starts, in the year 2035, where Scott Boras is going to be like 88 years old or whatever the case may be. Like where there's going to be situations where Boras is the one being unrelenting here. Boras is the one refusing to budge, where it's, the Bellinger contract as a blueprint. If he opts out, he gets a buyout in the deal. Well, it's like, if he opts out and he gets bought out, that is a factor for the luxury tax that year. Like, that is not something that gets deferred. So the Mets may not want to play in that. It's not about, it's an extra $2 million or whatever to get the dollar amount to something else. There's a lot missing here that we don't know about as fans. But I think, and again, Ryan is just reading tea leaves here from somebody who studies baseball contracts for his other job at justbaseball.com. But I think a lot of this stuff is very possible, where people who are on the outside looking in, which all three of us and everybody watching they're missing the point that there's some stuff here. It's not the money. It's not Steve Cohen going, you know what, Pete, we love you at $23 million. We really don't love you at $25 million. I'd rather keep $2 million in my pocket. If you think that's how Steve Cohen operates, you haven't been paying attention. No. It's not that. It's not these little bits of money.
No, and another thing that has to be brought up is we talked about this at length when the whole Soto stuff was going on, and why I said from the jump, people didn't agree with me when I said that, don't expect a lot of deferrals in the Soto contract, because Boras is a guy that likes the present day value. He wants to be the best and the top guy in terms of that. And if you looked at Boras's history of big time clients, he has not opted for deferrals. The guy takes their contract, all the money is up front. Like, this is what it's going to be. So this is kind of par for the course with him. And he's putting Pete in that category of one of his top flight players where, we don't want the deferrals. We want the upfront. We want this now. And then, of course, they're working in the opt-outs as well, because as I was saying to Matt before we went live, it's like he's taken on this task of Pete firing an agent where he turned down 7 years, where he's not getting that now. He turned down $150+ million, which he's not getting now. So now Boras is almost in I don't want to say panic mode, but he's a
little bit damage control.
That's the word, damage control, because he has to look good here, because he left where he was. That contract, that might to come to me because I am the best. Boras Corp is number one. We get our clients paid. We get the most. So even if it's going to be a shorter term deal, we're going to get our guy the best possible thing that we can. But the problem is, we watched everything unfold this entire offseason, and every single team that had an opening or that had a problem at first base signed somebody else, an older player, a one-off player, someone they think they can get for cheaper, or they traded for someone. Every single spot filled up. Toronto doesn't even fit on this bill, because I don't buy that Vlad's going to be going to third base. So I don't buy Toronto, honestly, in all of this. I don't, especially when he's trying to establish himself when it comes to the market. And yeah, maybe one can say, well, if he throws in third base, maybe it ups his market a little bit more because it's not just a first baseman. Maybe to an extent, but I don't think that the Jays want to really go that route. I really don't. So there's no market here. There's no market here, and you keep on denying, and you make it seem as though the Mets don't have options. They do. They could go the Mountcastle route if they want. They could go the Torkelson route if they want. There are avenues here. Or if they wanted to stay in-house, even though we don't like that too much, they could do that. But they do have options to where they can say to Boras, we don't have to listen to you. This is what we're offering. If you're not here and you don't want this, we're going to cut things off. I'm calling Baltimore, and I'm going to get Mountcastle. That's what I'm going to do. So like, there's no leverage here, in my opinion, on the Boras and Pete side. And they don't like that, and they're fighting, but they're going to lose the fight.
Look, before we pivot into that part of the conversation, I really want to get there. This one from Douglas is a good one. Douglas Barnes saying, I'm a greedy Mets fan. I don't just want one championship. I want all of them. I'm willing to have patience to build the whole system up. And the reason why I think this is a really good comment is because I often say the opposite of this, in that you cannot win multiple championships until you win the first one. So let's get the first one, right? But while I feel that way, I agree with Douglas in the sense that you cannot just dive headfirst in on everything that you think is going to make the best team right now in 2025, because to your point from earlier, Ibby, it didn't work out when they tried to do it after the success in 2022. 2023 was abysmal. Matt, to your point from earlier, they dove all in on a bad contract for Yoenis Cespedes after getting 2 or I guess a year and a half of really good baseball from him when it was ill-advised to do so. And so and from my point from earlier, where the Dodgers let people go all the time. They let Machado go. They let Turner go. They let Seager go, and Max Scherzer and Cody Bellinger. You have to not be obsessed with the immediate term. And I know it's hard to ask for patience from Mets fans, but like I tweeted out the other day, you can't expect to be the Dodgers when you act like the Angels. It is just a complete misconception that you can get to where the Dodgers are at by acting like a bottom rung franchise. You simply cannot do it. Ibby, you mentioned the two guys or some of the guys that are here for a potential fallback for the Mets if they don't, in fact, come to terms with Alonso, which I still think is the most likely outcome. I think the Mets and Alonso are going to figure out a way to make this happen. But like we said in the first half, I don't think that we as fans are going to have Brett Beatty at third and Mark Vientos at first. If you think that David Stearns got to the point that he's gotten to and he does not have a backup plan, you're insane. So whether it's Mountcastle, whether it's the other guy on the Orioles, like Ryan O'Hearn, who might be available, who can also play some first base, whether it's Spencer Torkelson as a change of scenery swap, I think the Mets are going to acquire another player to play the field if Pete Alonso doesn't come back. So Matt, one, what do you think about that? Like, how realistic do you think an acquisition that we don't really see coming necessarily as a fallback? And then who would be your favorite among those options? Looks like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a pipe dream at this point, but I think that there's some really good things to look at with a guy like Mountcastle. So where's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think David Stearns is bluffing when he says we have these options that we can consider. I think that obviously nothing is in place currently, but I'm sure they've had discussions with other teams about possibly acquiring other players. And you're right. I don't think that Toronto's necessarily going to let Vladimir Guerrero Jr. go, at least not at this stage. I feel that eventually he will get a long-term extension with them. Maybe not now, but eventually. As far as those options go, I would be somewhat interested in Torkelson. I know that he was terrible last year. Part of that was injury related. He did have a 30 home run season a few years ago, and he was a number 1 overall prospect. So there might be a little bit of upside there. He's still somewhat young, 25, 26. So I would be interested to see what he has. I think he's got some power in his bat. But you're right. I think what it comes down to is, look, we all love Pete Alonso. I would love to have him back on the team. But at the same time, it's about building an entire roster. It's about building an entire team. And you can't get so hooked on one player that you can't imagine a future without them on your team. And especially at first base, there are other options to explore. I'm not going to say that anyone can play first base, but certainly it is a position where you can take someone, as the Phillies did with Bryce Harper, completely different player, obviously, but you could take an outfielder like that and put him at first base. Or the Mets considering putting Vientos over there. So there are other options. Another thing I want to say is that as much as I love Pete, and to your point, John, I think there's still a very good chance that he re-signs with the Mets, because as you were saying, Ibby, I just don't think that there are a lot of options for him on the table. I think his market is very limited. It's either the Mets or maybe the Blue Jays, but I'm not convinced that those leaks that we've heard about those other teams weren't necessarily Scott Boras planted stories in order to put more pressure on the Mets. So I think that the Mets are the best fit for him. The Mets, I'm sure, would love to have him back, and I think he enjoys being a Met. But at the same time, I feel that Pete is partly in this situation, frankly, because his production the last few years has declined. If he was coming off a big year, obviously it's easy to say he should have had a huge walk year. But if he had an 850 OPS this year, I think it would be a much easier decision to get this negotiation done and bring him back. But unfortunately, he did have one of the worst years of his career. And I think a lot of fans are very swayed by recency bias, because he had that huge home run in Milwaukee, which was an incredible moment and one of the biggest home runs in Mets history, no doubt. But at the same time, if we're talking about his postseason performance, that's 11 games, maybe 40-something at-bats. David Stearns, being the smart guy that he is not going to make a decision based on that short a sample size. Okay. So I think in a lot of ways that Pete has really limited the market for himself. And because first basemen are available via trades and they're not being signed for huge contracts the way they were even 5-10 years ago, he is kind of cornered himself. And that's unfortunate for him, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Well, I think I think one of the things you have to consider when you talk about Pete, you nailed it, but it's by every metric, Pete has had a down year the last 2 years. So it doesn't matter if you're a quote unquote stats nerd for analytics, down year. It doesn't matter if you're a old school person who has, a high emphasis on batting average and RBIs, even though that's passé now, down year. It doesn't matter if it's the eye test. It doesn't matter. Like, all signs are pointing down, not just last year, but the year before that, because before 2024 happened, 2023 was the worst year that Pete Alonso ever put on paper. And now 2024 was worse than 2023. So that is a real trend that is descending. And Ibby, I'll toss it to you on this because, Chris Ferrara, I know, is tongue-in-cheek when he says this, but becoming Adam Dunn, the Pete Alonso story from the past 2 years, Pete Alonso wishes he was Adam Dunn. Adam Dunn was the definition of 3 true outcomes, sure, but he had a 400 on-base percentage with 40 home runs and a bunch of strikeouts. I'll take that from Pete Alonso every year for the rest of his career. If you tell me that Pete Alonso becomes prime Adam Dunn, the Mets would sign for that right now. Right now. They have a guy who they're very high on in the minor leagues to play first base that projects to be this kind of player in Ryan Clifford. This is what Ryan Clifford's projections look like. A 3 true outcomes guy, high on base, 40 home run potential, tons of strikeouts. Yeah, I'll take that. That plays. Pete Alonso wishes he could do that right now.
Yeah, obviously the on-base aspect is not something that Pete has in comparison, not even close to what Adam Dunn was. But I think also what Chris is saying is like the eventual downfall of Dunn is kind of the place where Pete is trending towards. Yeah, right. So, and obviously I got to give Keith his flowers here because of course he's been here forever saying this stuff. Hey guys, just remember who was way ahead of everyone on Pete Alonso and how he should have been traded 3 years ago. Pepperidge Farm remembers. Keith's been in our comments, and we love Keith with the QBC and everything. He's been saying that you got to get rid of Pete, trade him, do this and that. So Keith, this is your moment right now. And when it comes to the overall outlook of everything, I still have a hard time. Look, can Pete end up back here? Yes. Am I tired of this conversation? 1,000%. I am bored of it because there are other things I want to cover, but I know that it's dominating what this fan base is going through because It's just still hanging over our head. And then the Martino report comes out today, still hanging over our head. I have a hard time seeing Scott Boras, not Pete. I have a hard time seeing Scott Boras crawl back and come across as a loser to anybody, especially Steve Cohen, which is why I'm still weary of the fact and why I think, can Pete Alonso be here? Yes, he can. Does it make sense for him to be here? Yes, it could on the Mets' terms. Do I think David Stearns is going to sit on his hands and wait? No, I don't. I do think that there is a time limit eventually, and I sit here on the 29th of January, who I said it early in the offseason. This was going deep into January. Now I'm sitting here telling you that this is going to go post-Super Bowl. This isn't happening this week.
Jesus Christ.
I'm telling you, it's not.
I know you're right. I'm just upset about it.
I know, and everyone is, because we're tired of hearing about it. But I'm saying post-Super Bowl is the earliest that you're going to get some, because now we're getting to the point where Boras is going to play the game where if somebody gets hurt or other people can come into play, once pitchers and catchers start, once people get to spring training, like this is the route that he's going to go now, because he's going to wait for someone to say, oh my God, so-and-so got hurt. We need something. Now I got another bidder. Now I can drive things up. He's going to keep on sitting and waiting out because this is the way to go now. That's where I think that we are. It sucks. I hate it because it's going to keep on dominating the talking points for all of us. But I feel like that's where we're going to end up going.
I want to know from the chat, of the three people, I'll just say the two people, honestly, because I think they're the most realistic options right now. Of the two people we mentioned as a potential pivot from Pete Alonso, both available via trade, who would you rather have? And that's Spencer Torkelson from the Tigers, former #1 overall draft pick who has not been great in the major leagues. He would be kind of a change of scenery swap. Or you can go get Ryan Mountcastle from the Orioles, who to this point has had a better career. I believe this is the last year of his contract, so he would be probably a one-and-done stopgap player. Matt has already kind of given his opinion on that with regards to liking Torkelson and the upside. And Matt, I'll let you jump back in if you have any more on it. But Ibby, who would you rather have? Would you rather go with the more proven, or would you rather go with the more upside bat? Because I think they're both intriguing, but for completely different reasons. Very simply, I would rather Mountcastle just because I think that he's going to give you something that you can kind of sort of bank on. And unless your swap for Torkelson is just like Brett Beatty and you try to change scenery with both guys, I really don't want to give up anything else for Spencer Torkelson. I don't like him enough to give up a different kind of player prospect for him.
I was talking with Keith last night on Shea and Sons during his live, and he was saying how he thinks Torkelson wouldn't cost that much. And my retort to that was, I think that Tigers would be the ones pushing years because he has 4 years of control left. They can still push the #1 prospect, #1 player.
To that end, sorry, Mountcastle has 2 years of control, not one.
Right. So I think that it's still gonna cost you. And you can say, look, we're not paying you that or whatever. And then of course Detroit can then say, well, we're going to keep Torkelson. We're going to platoon him with Colt Keith because we haven't played Keith that much against lefties, and we think Torkelson could do well against lefties. So there's ways that Detroit can try to finagle this to try to get something more out of it. I choose Mountcastle. The 2 years, as Armand just mentioned, the 2 years is something that I would play into. And also it's the fact that he has something that Torkelson does not. Yes, more established in terms of his major league career. Torkelson had the 1 year of 30 homers. But for me, it's the flexibility. And it's the fact that David Stearns loves flexibility. And we know that Brandon Nimmo has the foot issues. We don't know what it's going to be. But Mountcastle has some experience in left field. That's a thing that definitely plays into all of this. So it gives you options in everything. So I think Mountcastle is a guy that I would target more so. And I think it was Charlie in the chat saying that SI put it out. I did not see it, but he mentioned that there was a potential, I think it was Tidwell and another player, Jack Whittaker. He corrected
himself from SI to Sporting News, which is where
okay. So just seeing that, like, would I do that deal? I would do that deal because I would too. I think that Blade Tidwell is the piece that the Mets are willing to give up. I don't think they're willing to give up Sproat. They're not willing to give up Tong. They're not willing to give up McLean. So I think if someone's asking for a pitcher, they will push in a deal to make that pitcher being Tidwell, since he had a little bit of an up and down. They're not sure if he's going to be a starter or reliever. So I think that that's the guy that will potentially go. And it makes sense for the Orioles to gain a pitcher because they have so much in the pipeline that losing a Mountcastle won't hurt them because they still have the likes of Kobe Mayo coming up. They have Sam Basayo. Like, they have options that are just chomping at the bit to get up there that have these incredible profiles. So attaining Mountcastle, I think, is definitely possible and a better fit for the Mets as opposed to Torkelson, in my opinion.
I think you made a good point with regards to the Tigers trying to use Torkelson in a role, especially when you talk about the guys who are on the come up with the Orioles, but also the guys who are already there with the Orioles. Like, I just think the Orioles have more position players they can give up than even the likes of the Tigers. Matt, I know that you said your piece on Torkelson, but I don't want to put the words in your mouth that you would prefer Torkelson over Mountcastle. So is there how do you feel on that particular two options? I can even add a third option for you. This one coming from Twitter, GSD saying Luis Arraez. I personally don't want any part of Luis Arraez. I know that the
if it gets me Michael King, I'll do it. If it gets me Michael King,
they're having a package, sure.
They're having a bit of a fire sale.
Yeah, I would. So yeah, Luis Arraez at first base. I think you want more power for the position, obviously.
Yeah,
than what Luis Arraez is going to give you, probably.
Especially if you're playing Jeff McNeil at second base.
8 home runs, 0 you could really expect from Luis Arraez in a given year. Yeah, like I am not passionate either way about Torkelson versus Mountcastle. I think you raised some good points about Mountcastle. I like the flexibility. So that is definitely a point in his favor. But as you said, Ibby, I think no matter what, if the Alonso deal does not get done with the Mets, obviously David Stern's going to look at every avenue he can, and there will be something done. Obviously, there will be a trade of some kind or some kind of transaction. I have a hard time thinking that they're not going to explore the trade market if that deal cannot get done.
That's I could see that being the case. I don't like Arraez at all, but I do like Arraez in a deal that allows us to get either Cease or Michael King. So let's take Arraez off the table. Let's pivot to the starting pitching portion of it, because look, it seems as though the Mets are mostly done as far as relievers are concerned. I could see them maybe making a late push to get a second lefty in here with Tim Hill or something like that. But I do think it's very crowded because a lot of these guys are out of options, even guys who maybe necessarily haven't been great, but you're intrigued by. The one that I always go to in that sense is Sean Reed-Foley. Like, I don't know, Sean Reed-Foley might be out of baseball in 2 years. Sean Reed-Foley might be the best reliever in baseball in 2 years. Like, there's just no, like, I don't think that second one's going to happen, but it's very hard to figure out exactly what he is. So I think it's harder for them to bring in another relief pitcher. But as far as starting pitchers go, I think there is an avenue. And going all the way back to the start of the show, we have Brad saying Mets are looking at Nick Pivetta. Then there's Cindy who's saying I would still take Flaherty all day, every day.
No
and then you have explosive diarrhea saying the Mets have, and a lot of people have said this. A lot of people have said this after the fact, but I had to bring up this one mostly because they were the first ones to do it, so I started. But also, you got to give a shout out to a name like this. The Mets have spoken to the Padres about both Dylan Cease and Michael King, and the one thing there is the Mets are active, it seems, in all aspects of the starting pitching market, because Cease and King are going to be more towards the top of the rotation. I would say Flaherty is more of a middle of the rotation guy. And I think Pivetta is probably a middle to back end, although people really love his stuff. I think that the knock against Pivetta is the qualifying offer that's attached to him. Flaherty doesn't have that. And of course, if you're trading for one of these other two guys, either Cease or King, both in their last years of their deals with the Padres, you don't have to deal with that either. So, Ibby, you've got to be encouraged no matter what that the Mets are looking at Cease, King, Flaherty, Pivetta, because I think we can all say, hey, if they can get another guy with good stuff in here, they're in really good shape as far as being as far as their starting rotation is concerned. So where do you go with regards to these guys? Is there one you could pick that you're like, this is the person I really want? Is it Cease? Is it King?
I look at this and I'll just prepare Chris's thing because it's spot on. Like Mets remain opportunistic, and that's what you want in a team. Like never settling, always being in the market, always looking around. You never know; you can always improve. And the guys that are out there still, Pivetta makes sense for this team. I'm a Nick Pivetta fan, but he's not going to be the guy because of the qualifying offer. If he didn't have the QO, that would be someone that you could actually exactly, Chris. That would be a guy that you might be able to go after. Flaherty makes more sense. That's still available because he doesn't have the qualifier. And I view Flaherty the way I viewed JD Martinez last year, where this could make sense because it could be something that falls into teams' laps. So like you're getting closer. We're in pitchers and catchers, maybe post pitchers and catchers, getting to spring training. Guy's still out there, takes a 1-year deal for $12 million, whatever it may be. Like I can see that. But if you're asking me which one do I want, I am staying on the phone with San Diego and I'm saying, what prospects do you like within our system? And I would take either King or Cease. I think either works. King obviously has some experience from New York. I love the stuff of both guys, both about to be free agents. King is 30. I think that Cease is 29 going on 30. So similar ages. Obviously, I think Cease might have the better stuff. Had a big year last year, but look, King burst onto the scene last year. I love everything that he has. If you're asking me to choose, I think that King is the one that makes the most sense. I think that he's the one that's attainable. And looking at a piece of the article, because someone sent it in our group, and I want to make sure that I read this. It was written about the Mets, saying how moving a top 10 to 15 ranked prospect in their farm system for King is one scenario that the Mets and Padres have discussed. So clearly, they're looking at their system and they're seeing what could potentially work for both sides. It's unknown what else a potential trade package would include, but the Mets have also been trying to add and trade outfielder/DH Starling Marte this offseason and are willing to pay down a portion of his salary. I don't know if Marte makes sense for the Padres. I don't know how their outfield situation is in terms of what they need and if paying down would even make sense. But from the aspect of the player, if they can get Michael King, I really think it transforms this starting rotation. It adds more depth, pushes people down one more rung. It allows what I've been saying for the longest time. Sean Manaea doesn't have to be the ace, and I think he's a much better pitcher when he doesn't have to be the ace.
Do you think Michael King is an ace?
I think that Michael King has the stuff to be an ace, yes. I think right now someone could say he's probably more of like a 2. They would probably look at that. Maybe someone even argue a 3. But when you watch this guy pitch, and I'm worried because he burst onto the scene through a lot of innings last year, so maybe he comes back down to earth a little bit. But I do think that Michael King has the stuff to be special, even at the age that he is. And I know people don't pay at 30, but I think that he is a guy that can be a top flight pitcher for a staff. And if you plug him in on this team in particular, where you could say, oh, you have King, you have Manaea, you have Senga. It's like, I think that those 3, I think it really works well. Some could say that Cease is more of an ace, but I think Michael King does have the stuff to be categorized as one, and I think he can take that step this year. So if you can land this guy, I'm not getting off the phone with San Diego. If they're truly selling, I am trying my damnedest to land Michael King. I am.
Okay, jump into the comments really quick before I kick it over to you, Matt. Armand saying King is 29, will be 30 in May. Cease is 29, will be 30 in December. So just about 6 months separates those two guys. So not a major age difference at all. This is a good one from Truro saying Buto could be a trade chip for the Padres. Maybe they would use him better. Of course, they had success with Seth Lugo, who, the Mets kind of forced into the role before Buto was forced into this role, because I believe Buto is out of options. So I would like to keep Buto, but I just know that once you get into a roster crunch, it becomes difficult. And Charlie saying, Jeff McNeil would like it in San Diego. Year-round golf, yeah, that would work. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. He's a
California boy.
He is. He's from Santa Barbara, I think. Any team that would roster Luis Arraez and Jeff McNeil, they should have to sell the team. You cannot roster.
Dead ball era baseball.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Is this 2025 or 1925? What are we talking about? So Matt, what do you think when you look at all of those guys as options? Obviously, you've been able to kind of think on this for a while. The Pivetta with the QO, Flaherty, it's just going to cost you money. Maybe it's a 1-year deal. Maybe it's a 2 or 3 year deal with opt-outs, whatever. Or do you swing a bit bigger and go after, Cease or King, both of whom have ace potential, but are just trade guys? Which one of those, if any, is the best one to you?
Yeah, I mean, sort of interesting options. Pivetta is one of those guys where, yeah, people love his stuff. I feel like people always are thinking that there's more to unlock there. Oh, he's got a great cutter. And yeah, he's fine, I guess, as a number 4, number 5 in your rotation. I like the upside of Michael King. I agree with you, AB. I think he has more. Obviously, last year was his first full season as a starter, and he performed extremely well. And I think he could continue to improve. To be honest, though, of those options, I would like Jack Flaherty the most. I love his competitive spirit. I think he's got the best stuff. But yes, that would have to be probably a shorter term deal, considering the injury history.
Yeah, I like Flaherty a lot. I don't know that he has the ace potential that Cease and King have. I think maybe slightly below that in terms of stuff, but I could be wrong. I could easily be wrong. I do like him a lot though. I don't like Pivetta for the qualifying offer. And I also don't like Pivetta for some of the stuff that you just said and we're alluding to with regards to the fact that, like, I don't know, is he ever going to figure it out? Well, how old's Pivetta? 32? Like, what are we talking about?
I think Pivetta probably is what he is at this point.
Yeah, like people are like,
somehow he's going to emerge as a number 2 or something like that.
I don't think so. And I just think that we have, to me, Pivetta is Frankie Montas. I think we already have that. So I think if you're going to acquire somebody, I think maybe try to shoot a little bigger. I don't know how realistic any of these options are, but it does seem like, based on the reports, that the Mets and the Padres, I wouldn't say they're close, and I don't have any information to suggest that they are, but it seems as though the talks are, I would gauge them as serious enough. I know that's kind of hedging, but again, like, it just seems to me like they're legitimate. Like, there's conversations being had.
A team like the Padres is doing the right thing. AJ Preller is always willing to wheel and deal, and he understands and he knows that he can get more from someone for an entire season as opposed to just half a season. If he has someone that has a year left and he's going to say, okay, what am I going to get more for? Giving this guy up now so they get a full season out of the player, or when I can give them up at the deadline for they only get 2 months and then they know that player is going to test free agency, so maybe they only get them for that time, then they lose their prospects, they lose all the control they have on said players. So he's doing the right thing by listening. I would not be shocked if someone does lend. I am very frightened that the Braves are also making these calls because they should. And I can.
Do you think they will trade both? Do you think they'll trade both of them? Do you see a world where Michael King is on the Mets and Dylan Cease is on the Braves?
I mean, it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me because the AJ Preller is the West Coast or the National League version of Jerry Dipoto in Seattle. Both on the West Coast, they love trade, they love doing all this stuff and moving pieces of that nature. So if they both go, wouldn't shock me because of where this franchise is in terms of turmoil within the family, the sale, the money, everything that's going on. They're trying to shed. I wouldn't be shocked if the deadline rolled around and if they fell out of it, if they were actually shopping Fernando Tatis Jr. It would not shock me because of all that is going on with them, because when these types of things are going on, the one thing that teams always try to do is shed money, shed big contracts. So that wouldn't shock me, would be detrimental to that fan base. They are great fans in San Diego. The stadium is awesome. Everything. The place is always red hot when the team is good, and they have been good. So I'm sure it's killing them right now that they're hearing these talks of getting rid of Dylan Cease and Michael King and Fernando Tatis Jr., or Manny Machado, like all these things. Like, they don't want that to happen. They want to keep on trying to win. I can see a world where both are gone. I think that at least one will be gone.
I agree. I think one of those players will be gone. I think it depends on how aggressive the pursuit gets. If AJ Preller is getting calls, let's say they start focusing in on Michael King and it's Mets and Braves and whoever else, and people are involved and they wind up pulling a trigger on one of the deals, they call up another one of those other teams and they say, hey, King's going to the Mets, but we got Cease. Are you willing to do A, B, and C? Like, I could see that happening. I could see that unfolding. And I hate to go back to the Alonso stuff for a second, but what you just mentioned about the turmoil in San Diego brought up a point that we have not gotten to on the show. And Matt, I'll kick this to you first and then Ibby. When you look at Alonso's potential options, whether you buy the Toronto hype or you look into go to Anaheim or whatever, because Anaheim will give out money and they give out bad deals all the time. Those seem to be the two places, aside from the Mets, that Alonso could maybe wind up. And when you talk about, again, I'm always for the player getting all their money that they can possibly get. But when you talk about the best situation for a player, how is Pete Alonso going to Toronto, where he is going to pay more money in taxes, even if they give him a little bit more money? It's a higher tax rate in Canada, in Toronto, than it is even in New York. Why would he go there knowing that next year their 40-man roster has like 3 people on it? And if it wasn't for the signing of Anthony Santander, they would have like 2 people on it. That roster might be barren next year. It might go from a place that is already not that desirable in terms of free agents to even less so, because it seems like that team is going to be in transition if they can't extend Guerrero and Bichette leaves and some of these other guys opt out. They have no pitching. That's not a good situation for him to go to. Anaheim might be the worst run organization in the entirety of the sport. And again, you're going to pay a higher tax in Anaheim than you are in New York. So I don't understand how he would pick to go to one of those places if the money is anywhere close. And again, this is not me advocating for him to take a hometown discount from the Mets. I do not believe in that. Get all the money that you want. But at some point, an extra $2 million when you're not making a good business decision for yourself as the player is just dumb. And that's why I think Pete Alonso is going to end up back on the Mets, because I can't find a baseball reason to put him in Toronto or to put him in, God forbid, Anaheim.
Yeah, if he signs in Anaheim, that's like going to the baseball wilderness. So I agree with that. And yeah, I don't think the Jays are a perfect fit either, because they're going to have him DH and keep Vlad at first, or they're going to move Vlad back to third. It seems like they would have to move pieces around just to accommodate Pete, rather than having a full-on open spot for him. So, and another thing is, if he had that contract in hand, if that had been presented to him, I feel that he probably would have signed that by now. Boras would have said, look, this team is willing to give you this much. You're not going to get better than that from the Mets. Let's do it. But as we've seen with Scott Boras, especially over the last couple of years, is he is willing to wait these things out. And in some time, and at times, I think it's actually to the detriment of the player. We saw with Blake Snell, signed so late, didn't really get to have a spring training last year, and then struggled a little bit. So, with Boras, yeah, sometimes he will wait even through spring training, where it's like, oh, the season's about to start in a few days, and this guy still hasn't signed. But if he can get that deal that he has eyed, he's willing to wait that out. And I think that's a very frustrating process for fans. And as you said, John, I'd never begrudge a player trying to get the best deal possible, trying to get as much money as possible, especially when it probably is going to be their only major payday of their career. So if this is the only big contract that Pete Alonso is going to sign, it only makes sense that he's going to look out for the best possible deal he can get. But frankly, I don't really buy that the Blue Jays and Angels are all that interested in him. I feel that the team that is most interested is the Mets. And either he is going to make that happen, or he is going to settle for a team that is not going to be in a position to compete. And that is ultimately what his decision is going to be.
Jump back into the comments. This one from Keith from a while ago, the media goon, saying Boras is like, we get our folks paid. Well, maybe not right away, maybe into spring training, maybe in the first few weeks of the season. Man, I really miss being early 2000s Scott Boras. That's a good one. Ibby, to just further this conversation on Pete, Charlie said before, Bob Nightingale has said that Toronto is offering Bregman 6 years. That would leave Vladdy on first. Again, no room for Pete up north. Now, anytime the Blue Jays are talking about signing anybody at this point, I am skeptical, simply because of their unwillingness to go into the second rung of the luxury tax historically with this ownership group. And the way that they structured Anthony Santander's contract makes it seem that they're butting right up against that threshold again. And that is a self-imposed line they are not willing to cross. So I don't believe that they're in on anybody over any length of time. But if Bregman does make more sense than Pete for Toronto for positional value. And if they ever were to do this, if this is in fact true, there is no room at the end for Pete Alonso. If Toronto signs Bregman, Pete Alonso's a Met. He's got to be. What's he going to do? Play in the KBO?
Sorry, everything is just, it's the game of musical chairs, and he's running out of chairs to sit in. Like, there's nowhere for you to go. Like, I'm with you. I don't trust anything that's being said about Toronto right now because they just keep on, they're trying to be the belle of the ball, but they keep on being, they're basically left at the altar. Nobody wants to be there. They're using them as a stalking horse almost. So yes, Bregman makes more sense. And if he does go there, Pete has absolutely nothing to work off of. So I guess, man, I am overworked on this entire Alonso thing. I'm just so.
I think we all just want the whole thing to be.
I want it to be over. I'm sick of it. And here's the thing. Like I love Pete. I do. I don't have an issue with Pete. I welcome him back. The sad part is he struggled last year in a walk year to not get the contract that he wants right now. And now we're going to be going into pitchers and catchers soon, potentially into spring training. This guy's not signed, not going to have the proper routine established to then what? Take an opt-out type of deal or a one-year deal with someone to try and then reestablish to go out again? Like, you're not helping your cause of trying to get money. So again, everything that has gone on with this guy's free agency has been foobarred. Everything has been fucked up beyond all recognition. And it's not working for him. It's going to end up being bad for him overall. It really is.
I say this is a guy who's been a longtime Pete Alonso supporter. And as somebody who has said multiple times on this show today, I still think he's coming back to the Mets. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. If I were David Stearns, if I were running the team for everything that Ibby just said, and I know position players are not pitchers and he doesn't have to get stretched out and all this stuff, especially starting pitchers. If I were David Stearns, I would put a deadline on this as like the start of players reporting. If Pete Alonso is not signed, I would then go trade for Ryan Mountcastle or something else. I don't know if you guys agree. I don't want this to go into spring training. I don't want the distraction. I don't like it. I'm done with it. I like Pete. I think this is where Pete belongs, but I would pivot at the start, like the day players of their mandatory reporting date for position players. That's the deadline I would have on this. Matt, I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, I agree. Because at a certain point, you do have to be willing to walk away. I mean, that is a key part of negotiations is that you have to be able to say, look, we're not going to be able to get a deal done. And this has been a multi-month process. And I don't think it's easy for a team to say, hey, we've had these discussions for this long and we've gone through these dollar figures and we've had the offers and the counter offers, and then to all of a sudden just say, you know what? This is not going to work. But you have to be able to say that at a certain point because you have to be able to put the team together. And you can't put off completing your roster just because you're waiting on one guy. And like we have all said, we all love Pete. We would all welcome him back. But you can't just put him above the rest of the team. At a certain point, you have to say, okay, that's not going to work. Who is going to play first base if he is not going to be our guy? And those wheels have to start turning at a certain point.
I just think I think it's right. I think it's only fair. Ibby, what about you? Would you put a deadline on this and walk away eventually?
I mean, based off of the things that I've said so far, I think everyone realizes I would put a deadline on all of this because I'm fucking
So then
tired
when
of
would it be? Would you wait further than mine? Would you put a deadline sooner than mine? I mean, really, mine is fast approaching.
I think yours is proper. And that really comes down to the guts of David Stearns. And if other things can happen as well, like think of it this way. If you put the deadline of yours on, okay, and then they say we're not budging, okay, then say you're able to trade for a Ryan Mountcastle. Now you can say, okay, we have a first baseman, a guy that can play first base, but we also have a guy that can play in the outfield as well if need be because of Nimmo. And then if you can somehow deal away a Marte opens up a position. You're still in the market there for Pete potentially if you were able to move a Marte, which is not going to be easy, I know.
Right.
But you still have an opportunity there if that was the case where someone could come crawling back. Because remember, if Stearns pushes the envelope here and says, look, this is it. Boras comes back and says, we're not budging. Okay, I'm trading for Mountcastle. They trade for Mountcastle. What happens to Pete's market then? If the Mets say, screw you, we're not waiting anymore, and they go and get Mountcastle or Torkelson or whoever, what happens then to Pete's market? It's a legit question. Like, what? Like, the Mets are the ones
he's going to have to take
offer.
He'll have to take a 1-year deal somewhere. That's what'll happen.
And
on someone else's terms completely.
On someone else's terms, a 1-year deal, and then are you going to crawl back still for a 1 year with the Mets, or are you going to say, screw this, I'm spiting you, I'm going somewhere else to play my 1 year because I feel, jaded after all of this?
Maybe
the Mets
stupid.
could easily press the issue there and say, this is what we're going to do, and then say, what are you going to do now? Now you're really coming in at our price. They could do that.
To be honest, and this would hurt us all as Mets fans if this ever happened, but the Yankees would have made more sense for him. I mean, they decided to sign Goldschmidt to a 1-year deal.
Right.
Yeah, if I were them, I would go with the 7 years younger Pete Alonso, who in a slightly more hitter-friendly ballpark would probably get closer to 40 home runs that he did this year when he hit 34. So, it feels like he's played himself out of options. And I don't think that this has been Boras's most masterful free agency so far.
It definitely hasn't. Cindy saying what a lot of people have said so far, Scott Boras is a great agent for superstars nowadays. I think I would add in, he's not good for second tier players. He's not. I think this is, again, shout out Ryan Finkelstein talked about this. He has a blind spot was the word that Ryan used for players like Pete Alonso. And I think that's a very, very smart word to use because it seems as though he can't get these people the deals that they're looking for or the deals that he used to be able to get them in the past. Armand saying that the first full squad workout for the Mets is February 17th. That's just under 3 weeks away. So I stand by. I did not have that date. I stand by my deadline. If you can't get this done in the next almost 3 weeks, then you
and
don't.
I think that's more than enough time.
Especially because it's been all off season so far. I know we're up against it. We're already over 2 hours. Let's just hit this real quick. Armand saying, yes, the Royals did indeed sign closer Carlos Estevez. It's $22 million was, I think, the deal, 1-year deal. So he got his money. Royals have a sneaky good bullpen right now. Maybe not even sneaky good, just good. So another reliever off the board. Relievers are starting to fly off the board here late in the offseason. Last thing we should talk about for sure, guys, is Keith asked before, can I put the Mets new blue alternate jerseys in the Independence safe? Chris Ferraro saying the new jerseys need the letters colored in. So your thoughts on the new jerseys that the Mets unveiled at Amazin Day. We'll start with our guest, Matt. What do you think?
So overall, I like the jerseys. I like the coloring of them, but I totally agree with Chris. This is an issue that I had with some of the City Connect jerseys, actually, is that for me, when it comes to wearing a uniform, I want to be able to read the name on the back of the jersey. That is very important. And it seems like with a lot of these new jerseys that they're coming out with, the lettering blends into the background color of the jersey. And so blue on blue with the orange outline, to me, you need some kind of white drop shadow or piping on there to really make it pop. And if it had that element, I think it would be an amazing jersey. As it is, it's a nice jersey, but for me, the lettering is a little bit of an issue. And like I said, that was the issue I had with the City Connects, is that I would have run out and bought a City Connect right away if there had been a little more purple to make the lettering stand out and make it easier to read the names on the back of the jerseys. But the gray on the gray kind of faded in. And so that's an issue I'd have. But overall, I like the design.
Fair enough. I do want to pull this one up because I misspoke. Armand saying Estevez deal is 2 years, $22 million with an option for a third year. So thank you for that. Ibi, what do you think about the jerseys? You said that me and you might butt heads a little bit on this.
A little bit. I'm gonna continue Matt's point about transparent numbers and letterings. Like, I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it reads well, and I'm always curious on how things are gonna look on television. Obviously, I love talking jerseys and logos and things like that, and the overall aesthetic of things. I love the script. I love a good script. Obviously, we have like a little bit of the sloppy script in our logo or whatever, but when it comes to people not liking the 87 jerseys because of that script, I didn't think it read well. I like them. I think they look cool. And I love when they were wearing the New York hats last year as well when they were on the road.
I actually have one of the 87 jerseys, the Mitchell and Ness, Keith Hernandez with the captain C on it.
Yeah.
I have with the script. I have one of those. So I've always liked the design.
I like the lettering. I wish it was filled in. And where I think me and you are going to differ, John, where I'm going to say, look, I don't mind the jerseys as they are. Do I think they can be better? Absolutely. I think they should be filled. I think that if it was a blue jersey, as it is, if you filled in the letters with orange, and if you had a slight outline, like a thin outline of gray to then go with the gray pants and blue socks, that's the route that I would go. And I think that's where we butt heads a little bit, John, when it comes to the pants aspect of this jersey top. That's where I think we differ a little bit, but that's what I would do because I think it would look 10 times better. And of course, if you said to me that this was like a home alternate, but it's a road, but if you filled it in with the orange and outlined it with white and then had white pants, that'd be a great home alternate as well. But as the road, I think you go with the silverish grayish with the gray pants and the blue sock. Fill it in with the orange lettering. I think it would pop that much more and look a little bit more complete. That's where I am on it.
I'll jump into the comments before I give my opinion. Barman San Diego saying, looks like a Knicks warm-up shirt. Letters need to be gray and it needs buttons. Stephanie saying, Lindor said they're sick. The Fashion King has spoken, LOL. But then said, I like the new jerseys. They look better in person.
She was an amazing day.
Yeah, Keith saying, no drop shadow, please. Armand saying the lettering should have been white outline, not orange. Carlos, when I saw those jerseys, I thought the Mets had started sponsoring a softball team. Zero Cool, I think this is a little tongue-in-cheek, saying all alternates suck. Seaver didn't wear them, so no one else should wear them. This feels like a little bit of sarcasm. If not, that's also fine, but I think that's a joke from Zero Cool. He's saying the New Jersey should either have the letters or numbers filled in with orange or silver. So a lot of sentiment that kind of a lot of folks share the sentiment from the two of you guys. I will say this. I like them. I don't love them. I like when teams take a swing and try something different. So I like going back to the New York script. Like I said, I own one of those jerseys from the 87 design. So I've always liked that. But I like, listen, they wore that for 1 year. It wasn't well received. Hell, give it another shot. Let's try it again. Let's do it a little different. Let's tweak it. So I like that aspect of it. Nike and Fanatics are horrendous. Everything that they make is lately, it's terrible. I don't like the wishbone collar. I don't mind that the jerseys are pullover and not button up. I think you can have a pullover, but that wishbone collar, I don't think works. We saw it first with the Nationals last year with one of their alternates, and they already have ditched that alternate for a different alternate. So I think that that's something that, it's not working early on. I think it's kind of ugly. I do think if you are not, I agree with both of you. I think you should have filled in. I don't like the names and numbers and team names being the same color as the jersey. You lose a little something there. However, if you are going to wear these jerseys, I think the pants need to be blue. There is no gray on this jersey at all. So I don't think a gray pants with a blue piping is going to look good. I think the pants need to be blue and the piping needs to be orange, and then everything is just blue and orange. And people are going to disagree with me like that. They're going to say it looks ugly and that's horrendous. And maybe you're right, but I just think the whole thing, the whole kit, if you want to use it to borrow it from soccer, I think the whole thing needs to be blue because the gray pants don't make sense on a jersey.
I don't know that the blue would work.
Why does the gray work? There's no gray on the jerseys. To me, I think give it a try with blue pants. Go nuts. If you're going to swing big.
From the all blue ones that I think Ant from Subway Shea put into our group chat when like Granderson was on the team and they wore the big NY On the front, it was
the one of the
pants.
Negro Leagues, the Royal Giants,
like Kansas City Monarchs throwback kind of a thing.
Like those, like for me, I've always been someone that likes two different colors. I said when we were talking about the City Connects back when they came out, I said I was praying that they were going to wear white pants because I thought if they wore gray, they would look like hefty bags. If they wore all gray, I was scared of that. Also because I think certain jerseys just don't look good when it's all one color. There are some exceptions. Obviously, when you look at it in terms of just like white on white, which is or white or pinstripes or gray on gray, like that's fine. It works. It's become the norm. But when you go a little bit outside the box, like John's saying, he doesn't mind in certain situations. Some teams can pull it off, like the Phillies all red throwbacks. When you look at the light blues, whether it is St. Louis or if it's the Twins, but other ones not.
Yeah,
so
see,
much.
I think all those are cool. I think the powder blues are cool. The all reds are cool.
And then you look at a team like the Blue Jays, who I think have worn all blue at one point. I was like, not so much. I'm not feeling it. Maybe it's because the other ones, the shading maybe looked a little bit better. But I think it's really dependent on the jersey, and I'm not sure. Either way, I'm still going to watch the games. It doesn't matter. But like aesthetically, I'm with you that it's hard to make sense because there is no gray, but I think that they will opt for gray because gray is associated with an away team. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, all right. It doesn't really matter, honestly, at the end of the day.
Just
right?
win ball games.
Just win ball games. But I do think
makes everything look good.
Yeah, I think that Nike and Fanatics has been making a lot of mistakes. I don't think they were as bad as we thought they were going to be, but taking the white off of the black jerseys was something, and the blue trim, I think that dumbed it down. I don't think you needed to do that. I don't like any of the City Connect jerseys. I like some better than others, but I think they're all pretty pointless. So I think, the Mets having to get rid of a jersey now too. They're going to have to get rid of either the black jersey or the blue alternate jersey for this one. That's also a dumb rule, and I don't think this jersey is worth getting rid of another one of those other jerseys for. But here we are. This is the time where people just have to make as much money as they can by making new jerseys. Yeah. It is what it is. I don't think that these are going to be long for the world. Chris Ferraro saying the Padres are retiring their pink and green City Connects after this year. How sad. I actually think that is sad. I think those are cool and inventive. I thought the Washington Nationals one with the cherry blossoms was cool. They're getting rid of that. They're getting a new one. It's just all so dumb. Anyway, this has been a really good show. Matt, awesome. Thank you so much for being here, giving us over 2 hours of your time. One more time, where can folks find you on social media?
You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. My handle is Searle Baseball, Searle Baseball. And you can find all the latest Mets news. I take a lot of photographs from Citi Field, from the home games that I worked during the year. And just like to keep the fans entertained and to provide top-notch content throughout the year. So follow me at Searle Baseball.
It was an absolute pleasure having you on here, having you on the show. I do believe in giving folks their flowers. So this one, a little bit for me and Ibby as well. But Darren saying the greatest podcast duo. Thank you, John and Ibby. Outstanding show and top-notch guest, Matt. An incredibly informative performance. Thank you, Darren. A lot of people are echoing that. Chris Ferraro saying, Matt is the best, and I agree. It's absolutely great having you on.
Awesome show.
That's what I do.
Ibby, did we miss anything? Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, we covered everything, and I'm hoping to God that we get some sort of resolution or just a new cookie to be fed by the time we go live on Wednesday of next week, because I do not want to make another thumbnail with Pete Alonso on it. I want to talk some new things, or maybe we'll just make the executive decision to not talk Pete. But odds are something is going. I know. Odds are something is going to be dropped into the environment, into the atmosphere that's going to cause us to talk about something. But we covered everything that I wanted to cover. Fantastic show. Thank you so much, Matt, for your time. It was awesome. Chat, shout out to you. 750 we peaked at today. Awesome. A lot of people coming over from Twitter. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are on our way towards 1250 as we push towards 1,300 subs. And if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter. Follow us on TikTok. I've been punching out a lot more stuff on there. I will continue to do that as I'm trying to get us more seen with some of our shorter end stuff as opposed to watching us for 2 hours in the long form. So head on over to TikTok and search at Til Mets Do Us Part. You can find us on there as well as we continue to grow over there. But shout out to all of you. Thank you so much. And of course, let's go Mets.
And remember, if you missed any of this show and you want to watch it, whether you had to leave early or you got here late, as soon as we're done with the broadcast, which is going to be in the next couple seconds, you can watch the entirety of this show on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Til Mets Do Us Part. Make sure that you subscribe, turn your notifications on. That's the best way for you to become a full-fledged participant in the next live stream, because in order to comment, you've got to be a subscriber. And like Ibby said, we're getting closer to 1250, getting closer to 1300. We appreciate it. Could not do it without you guys. And if you can't do any of that, this will drop later on tonight as an audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, all of those places, so that you can take us in your pocket on your way to work, on your way to school, on the subway, while you're on a run, while you're at the gym. The only difference is you will not see our lovely smiling faces. But it has been an absolute blast. 2 hours and 18 minutes and counting. One of the longest shows we've done in a very long time. Shout out one more time to Matt Searle, our guest this week. And like Ibby said, LGM. Let's go Mets. We'll see you next time. Peace.